Mama, this is for you. It's all paid off. Oh my God. Oh, my baby.
Look, this is for the best, Mom. It makes sense for everyone.
I don't know, son. I really don't want to lose the house. No, this is impossible. What is it, Mom? I have to call my attorney.
3 weeks before my son's wedding, Marcus sat across from me at my kitchen table and slid a stack of bank papers beside my coffee. "I need you to transfer the savings before the wedding, Mom," he said, "all $420,000 of it." He smiled as if he were asking me to sign a birthday card. "Once Claire and I are married, things get complicated. We should handle this while it's still just us." For one foolish second, those words touched me. Then I looked at the receiving account. I didn't recognize it. I didn't argue. I didn't accuse him. I simply folded the papers and told him I would think about it. The next morning, I didn't call my bank. I called my attorney. And instead of transferring a single dollar, I changed a document my son had been quietly counting on for years. Before I tell you what I changed and why, if you've ever had to choose between helping someone you love and protecting yourself from them, I'd love to hear what you would have done. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. And if stories about family trust and the boundaries we sometimes learn too late speak to you, please like this video and subscribe. To understand why I didn't immediately throw those transfer papers back at Marcus, you have to understand what my son meant to me before money began changing the way he looked at my life. My name is Naomi Brooks. I was 68 years old that spring, and I had lived in Richmond, Virginia for nearly 36 years. The house where Marcus placed those papers beside my coffee wasn't impressive by Richmond standards. It was a two-story red brick colonial on a quiet street lined with dogwoods and old maples. The kitchen cabinets were 15 years old. The hardwood floors creaked near the stairs. One shutter on the back window never sat quite straight no matter how many times my husband fixed it. But it was ours. Charles and I bought that house when Marcus was 3 years old. Back then we could barely afford it. I still remember standing in the empty living room after closing, staring at the mortgage documents, and wondering whether we had made the biggest mistake of our lives. Charles wrapped one arm around me. "We'll grow into it," he said. We did. We grew into the mortgage, into parenthood, into careers, into arguments and anniversaries and school photographs and Christmas mornings. By the time Charles died, nearly 4 decades of our lives were contained inside those walls. Charles owned a small commercial electrical business called Brooks Electrical Services. At its largest, he employed 12 people. He wasn't a wealthy businessman, despite what Marcus sometimes liked to imply later. Charles wore work boots until the soles separated and drove the same pickup truck for 13 years. I worked in payroll administration for a regional medical supply company for 27 years. Numbers were my life. Hours worked, taxes withheld, insurance deductions, retirement contributions, overtime, vacation balances. There was nothing glamorous about payroll, but I liked certainty. 2 plus 2 stayed 4 no matter how badly someone wanted it to become 5. Maybe that was why Charles and I were good at saving. We never had enormous incomes, but we understood patience. Every paycheck something went away. Every good year at Charles's business, he increased his retirement contribution. Every tax refund went toward the mortgage or savings. When friends bought boats, we rented one for a weekend. When neighbors replaced perfectly good kitchens because styles changed, I painted our cabinets. Charles used to tease me. "You can make $20 feel guilty for leaving your purse." I would answer, "And that's why I still have $20. We weren't miserly. We traveled. We took Marcus to Disney World when he was 9. We rented a beach house in North Carolina for family vacations. We went out for dinner on anniversaries. When Marcus graduated from college, we gave him enough money for a reliable used car. But Charles had one rule: never spend money to make strangers think you have money. That rule mattered to him. I didn't understand until much later how differently our son saw it. When Charles died 4 years before Marcus's wedding, I thought grief would destroy me. He was 71. His illness moved quickly enough that I never had time to adjust to the idea of losing him. One autumn we were arguing about whether the gutters needed replacing. By winter I was sitting beside a hospital bed listening to a doctor explain treatment options. A few months later, I was choosing a suit for my husband to be buried in. There are losses that arrive like explosions. Then there are losses that quietly remove the structure holding up your entire life. Charles's death was the second kind. For months afterward, I kept expecting his key in the front door around 5:30. I made too much coffee. I reached toward his side of the bed in my sleep. I left his work jacket hanging in the mudroom because moving it felt too much like admitting he wasn't coming home. Once, 6 months after the funeral, I accidentally bought his favorite cereal. I discovered it while unloading groceries and sat in my car crying for nearly 20 minutes. Marcus was wonderful during those months. That matters, because it would be easy to tell this story as if my son had always been selfish. He hadn't. He called almost every day. He repaired things around the house. He drove me to the cemetery the first time I was too afraid to go alone. On what would have been our 40th wedding anniversary, Marcus arrived with dinner and stayed until almost midnight. That was the Marcus I remembered whenever something about him worried me later. My boy. My only child. The little brown-haired child who ran through the house with grass stains on his jeans. The teenager who claimed he was too old to hug his mother in front of friends, but still kissed my cheek before leaving. The grown man who stood beside me at Charles's funeral and held my hand so tightly my fingers hurt. Maybe that is one of motherhood's dangers. You carry every version of your child inside you. Sometimes the child you remember makes it difficult to see the adult standing in front of you. Financially, Charles had left me secure. Not rich in the way people imagine when they hear the word inheritance. Secure. There is a difference between savings accounts, certificates of deposit, and money accumulated over decades. I had approximately $420,000 in liquid savings. That was the money Marcus would eventually ask me to transfer. But it wasn't everything Charles and I had built. The house was paid off. I had retirement investments and steady retirement income. There were also assets held through the Brooks Family Trust, which Charles and I had created years earlier after his business became established. I rarely discussed exact numbers. Not with friends, not with relatives, not even with Marcus. He knew his father and I had planned carefully. He knew he was our only child. He knew that eventually he would probably inherit something substantial. But Charles had always been cautious about letting Marcus think too much about that future money. Marcus was 39 when he became engaged to Claire. He was intelligent, funny, ambitious, and extraordinarily good with people. He could enter a room knowing nobody and leave 20 minutes later with 3 business cards, a dinner invitation, and somebody promising to introduce him to a potential client. Charles used to say Marcus could sell umbrellas in Arizona. But there was another side to him. Marcus liked the appearance of success. Sometimes I worried he liked it more than success itself. After college, he rented an apartment that cost more than Charles thought sensible. His first new car was nicer than ours. When he launched his consulting company, he leased an office in a polished downtown building, even though Charles suggested working from home until revenue became predictable. Marcus laughed. Dad, clients care about image. Charles replied, clients care whether you can deliver. You don't understand how business works now. I remember the expression on Charles's face. He didn't argue. Later, while we were getting ready for bed, he said, that boy keeps decorating rooms before he builds the walls. I defended Marcus. He's ambitious. I know. You make that sound like a flaw. Ambition isn't the flaw. What is? Charles looked at me, needing people to see it. Marcus did work hard. I want to make that clear. He wasn't lazy. His problem was that he always seemed to live 6 months ahead of what he had actually earned. If business improved, he upgraded something. If business slowed, he insisted the next contract would fix everything. And because he was our only child, I helped sometimes. More often than Charles knew. A few $1,000s during a difficult month. A credit card payment. Part of an unexpected tax bill. I never called those things rescues. I called them helping my son. That distinction would eventually become very important. Then Claire came into his life. She was 36, an event planner, organized and warm with a quiet confidence I liked immediately. Her parents, Richard and Susan, lived in Northern Virginia and had done well for themselves. Claire didn't seem impressed by money. She was the kind of woman who could plan an elegant corporate event on Friday and spend Saturday morning in jeans helping me carry boxes into the attic. Most importantly, Marcus seemed happy around her. When he proposed, I cried. I genuinely believed marriage might settle something inside him. The wedding plans became elaborate quickly. A historic venue outside Richmond, nearly 200 guests, custom floral arrangements, a live band, an overseas honeymoon. Whenever I asked Marcus whether everything was becoming too expensive, he gave me the same confident smile. Business is good, Mom. I wanted to believe him, so I did. Looking back, there were signs. A credit card declined at dinner that Marcus blamed on fraud protection. A phone call he stepped outside to answer returning pale and distracted. A joke about needing one big contract before the wedding. Nothing seemed serious enough to justify suspicion. And whenever doubt entered my mind, I remembered something Charles had said about a year before he died. We were sitting on the back porch when Marcus drove away in a car he had just purchased. Charles watched the taillights disappear. Then he said quietly, "Naomi, there may come a day when helping that boy means not giving him what he asks for." I frowned. That sounds harsh. No. Charles kept looking toward the street. Harsh would be letting him believe our life's work can replace his judgment. I became irritated. I thought he was criticizing our son unnecessarily. After Charles died, I rarely allowed myself to remember that conversation, until Marcus began asking questions about my finances. At first, the questions sounded responsible. Had I updated my beneficiaries? Did someone know where my important documents were? What would happen if I became ill? Could anyone access my accounts during an emergency, a concerned son worrying about his widowed mother? That was how I interpreted it. That was how I wanted to interpret it. But then his questions became more specific. He asked about accounts I had never discussed with him. He mentioned consolidation. He talked about gaining access so he could help. And repeatedly, strangely, he insisted that we should organize everything before his wedding. I kept telling myself Marcus was simply becoming responsible. Then one Sunday afternoon, he mentioned the exact balance of a certificate of deposit I had never told him existed. And suddenly I remembered Charles sitting beside me on that porch. There may come a day when helping that boy means not giving him what he asks for. For the first time, I wondered whether that day had finally arrived. The first time Marcus asked who could access my bank accounts if something happened to me, I thought he was being thoughtful. That is difficult for me to admit now. Not because I was foolish to trust my son, but because once you know how a story ends, every warning sign seems enormous. At the time, each one was small enough to explain away. It was a Sunday afternoon about 6 weeks before the wedding. Claire had gone to meet with the florist, and Marcus arrived at my house carrying sandwiches from a deli Charles and I had loved. I remembered he said, holding up the bag, "Turkey on rye with mustard, no mayonnaise." I smiled. "You may survive being my son after all." He laughed and kissed my cheek. For the next hour, he behaved exactly like the Marcus I wanted him to be. He changed the batteries in my smoke detectors. He tightened a loose cabinet handle. He carried 2 bags of mulch from the garage to the backyard. I loved having him there. Sundays had been difficult since Charles died. For almost 40 years, Sunday afternoons belonged to us. Church in the morning, coffee afterward, yard work. If the weather cooperated, then a late lunch. Charles usually fell asleep in his recliner with a newspaper across his stomach. Even 4 years after his death, I sometimes looked toward that chair expecting to find him there. So when Marcus began visiting more often, I interpreted it as kindness. We were finishing lunch when he asked, "Mom, have you thought about what would happen financially if you had an emergency?" I looked up. "What kind of emergency? I don't know." "If you fell. If you ended up in the hospital." "I'm 68, Marcus, not 98. He laughed. "I know. I'm not trying to bury you." Something about the joke bothered me. I ignored it. He told me one of his clients had recently gone through a terrible situation with an elderly father who became incapacitated. The family couldn't get into accounts. bills weren't being paid. Nobody knew where anything was. That's why your father and I made an estate plan. I know, but estate documents and practical access aren't always the same thing. I stared at him. Marcus had never been interested in estate planning. When Charles and I first created our trust, Marcus complained that legal documents gave him a headache. Now he sounded as if he had attended a seminar. Everything is organized, I said. Beneficiaries updated, yes. Emergency contact, yes. Power of attorney. I put down my sandwich. You're asking an awful lot of questions. His expression softened immediately. I worry about you. There are sentences adult children can say that reach directly past a mother's judgment. That was one of them. I touched his hand. I'm fine. I know. I want to keep it that way. If the conversation had ended there, I probably would have forgotten it. But money kept finding its way into our conversations. A few days later, Marcus called and asked whether managing accounts at different banks was becoming inconvenient. Then he sent me information about consolidating savings. He asked whether I still owned certificates of deposit. He talked about interest rates. He suggested putting most of my liquid savings somewhere he could help oversee. I laughed the first time. Since when are you my financial advisor? I'm not. You certainly sound like one. I'm just trying to make life easier for you. My life isn't difficult. I know, Mom. That became his favorite response. I know, Mom. Then he would continue as if I hadn't answered. But eventually you may want someone helping. Eventually. That word appeared more and more. Eventually I might need assistance. Eventually the house could become too much. Eventually someone would have to manage things. Eventually Marcus would inherit responsibility. Individually, none of those statements were unreasonable. Together they created a feeling I couldn't name. Then the wedding became part of the conversation. One Tuesday evening, I was watering hydrangeas when my phone rang. Hey, Mom. Hello, sweetheart. Did you look at those account options? Not yet. A pause. You should. I will. The wedding is getting close. I turned off the hose. What does your wedding have to do with my bank accounts? Nothing directly. Then why did you mention it? He sighed. Because my life is changing. Once Claire and I are married, there'll be new responsibilities. I'd rather get family financial matters organized before then. Why, it's simpler. For whom another pause. For everyone. That wasn't an answer. Does Claire know you're helping me organize my finances? Not really. Why not? Because your finances are private. That answer should have comforted me. Instead, it made me uneasy. If my finances were private, why was Marcus so determined to involve himself in them? A few days later, he stopped by while I was grocery shopping. He still had a key to my house. That had never concerned me. He said he needed an old photograph of Charles for a memorial table Claire planned to display at the wedding. I told him the family albums were in the cabinet in my home office. When I returned, Marcus was gone. He texted me. Found it. Thanks, Mom. Love you. I smiled when I read it. Nothing seemed wrong. Until the following Sunday. Marcus was drinking coffee at my kitchen table when he said almost casually, "You should probably move that $68,000 when the CD matures." My hand stopped halfway toward my cup. What, the certificate of deposit? Which one, the one maturing next month? He took another sip. You can probably get a better rate. I stared at him. There were 3 things wrong with that sentence. I had never told Marcus that certificate existed. I had never told him its maturity date. And I certainly had never told him the balance. $68,000, not 60,000, not approximately 70, exactly 68. Marcus. Something in my voice made him look up. How do you know how much money is in that CD? For perhaps half a second his face went completely blank. Then he smiled. I thought you told me. No. Maybe Dad did. Your father has been gone 4 years. I renewed that CD 18 months ago. The smile disappeared. Well, maybe I saw something, where I don't know. You just remembered an exact balance but don't remember where you saw it. His shoulders tightened. Mom, why are you interrogating me? I asked a question, and I answered. No. You gave me 3 different possibilities. He pushed his chair back slightly. I'm trying to help you. I didn't ask for help. Silence. I rarely spoke sharply to Marcus. His expression changed from defensive to wounded so quickly that guilt rose inside me. That was an old pattern between us. Marcus became hurt. I became softer. But this time I didn't apologize. Finally, he said, "Maybe I saw a statement when I came for Dad's picture. In my desk, I don't remember. The albums aren't in my desk. They're in the same room. You opened my financial papers, I didn't say that. Then how did you see the statement?" He stood. "This is ridiculous. Marcus, I saw a number somewhere. I remembered it. That's all." He carried his cup to the sink. Then he turned and gave me a tired smile. "You've been alone too much, Mom. You're worrying about things that don't matter." That sentence landed harder than anything else he had said. Maybe because it sounded less like my son and more like someone trying to make me distrust myself. I'm perfectly capable of deciding what matters to me. I know. There it was again. I know. He came over and kissed my forehead. "I have to go. Claire's waiting." I watched him leave. The moment his car disappeared, I walked directly to my home office. Nothing looked disturbed. My desk was exactly where it always was. Charles's photograph still sat beside the lamp. The cabinet containing the family albums was closed. For a moment I felt embarrassed. Maybe Marcus was right. Maybe grief and age were making me suspicious. Then I opened the top desk drawer. My financial folder was inside. I removed it and laid the statements across the desk. I had worked in payroll for 27 years. Organization was practically a reflex. Newest statements on top. Accounts separated. Dates in order. Now they weren't. A savings statement had been placed behind an older document. A retirement summary was upside down. And the CD statement Marcus had mentioned was near the front. I stared at it. The exact balance was printed halfway down the page. $68,000. I sat in Charles's old desk chair. Maybe Marcus had opened the drawer accidentally. Maybe he had been looking for something else. Maybe he had seen the statement and become concerned about whether I was getting a competitive interest rate. I kept creating innocent explanations because the alternative was painful. Then I noticed a faint crease across the CD statement. It ran diagonally from the upper corner toward the center. I knew I hadn't folded it. I lifted the page. Underneath it was another statement from my savings account. That one had also been moved. My stomach tightened. I went to the cabinet where the albums were kept. The wedding photograph Marcus wanted had been removed exactly where I told him it would be. He had no reason to touch my desk. I returned to the statements. For the first time, I allowed myself to ask a different question. Not whether Marcus had seen my financial information. I was almost certain he had. The real question was why. Why did my son need to know exactly how much liquid money I had? Why was he suddenly interested in beneficiaries, account access, certificates of deposit, and consolidation? And why did everything seem to have the same deadline, his wedding? I sat alone in that office for a long time. Then something Charles once told me returned with uncomfortable clarity. When someone rushes you around money, Naomi, the deadline usually belongs to them. Marcus had spent weeks telling me he wanted to make my life easier. But sitting there with my disturbed bank statements in front of me, I finally wondered whether any of this had ever been about my life. Maybe it was about his. And for the first time since my son began asking questions, I stopped feeling confused. I started paying attention. Once suspicion enters a relationship, ordinary things stop feeling ordinary. A phone call becomes something you analyze after hanging up. A harmless question starts sounding rehearsed. Even a smile can make you wonder what the person smiling knows that you don't. That was what frightened me most. Marcus had not confessed to anything. No money had disappeared from my accounts. No signature had been forged. I had no proof he had photographed or copied my financial statements. All I had was a son who knew information I had never given him, and a growing feeling that I was being prepared for something. The wedding was less than 2 weeks away when Claire's parents invited us to dinner at a restaurant in downtown Richmond. Richard and Susan were good people. Richard had spent most of his career in commercial real estate. Susan had worked as a physical therapist before retiring. They were financially comfortable, but they never made me feel as though Charles and I had belonged to a different world. That evening I arrived first. Susan hugged me near the entrance. "You look beautiful, Naomi. So do you." She laughed. At our age, good lighting deserves half the credit. I liked her immediately for things like that. Claire arrived with Marcus 10 minutes later. My son wore a charcoal gray suit I hadn't seen before. It fit perfectly. "You look handsome," I told him. He kissed my cheek. Can't embarrass Claire in front of her parents. He was joking. At least I thought he was. But lately, so much of Marcus's life seemed designed around not embarrassing himself in front of other people. We sat down. For the first half hour, the conversation stayed safely centered on the wedding. Claire discussed the flowers. Susan worried about transportation for older relatives. I asked whether they had finalized the seating chart. Richard complained jokingly that every time he thought the budget was complete, someone discovered another category requiring money. Claire rolled her eyes. "Dad, I'm not complaining. You're definitely complaining. I'm observing." We laughed. Then the conversation moved to the honeymoon. Marcus and Claire were planning almost 2 weeks in Italy. Rome first, then Florence, then several days along the Amalfi Coast. "It sounds wonderful," I said. Claire smiled. "I'm excited, although I told Marcus we could have done something simpler." Marcus reached for his wine. "You only get married once." Richard lifted his glass. "That's exactly what I told Susan 38 years ago. And you've been paying for it ever since Susan said." Everyone laughed again. Everyone except me. I was watching Marcus, the suit, the expensive wedding, the international honeymoon, the polished downtown office he maintained for his consulting company. 6 months earlier, none of it would have concerned me. Now I was thinking about a credit card that had been declined when we went to dinner several weeks before. Marcus had laughed and blamed fraud protection. I remembered a phone call he had stepped outside to answer at my house. He returned pale. When I asked whether something was wrong, he said a client was being difficult. Then there had been his joke about needing one big contract before the wedding. Separate moments, small moments, but suspicion has a way of connecting dots you once refused to see. After dinner arrived, Richard asked Marcus about his consulting business. "Still expanding." Marcus nodded confidently. "We've had a strong quarter. That's good to hear. We're talking with 2 potential clients right now. Either one could change things considerably." There was that future language again. Could. Potential. Soon. Marcus had always been good at describing tomorrow as if it were money already deposited today. Claire looked at him. "You didn't tell me about the second client. It came up this week." "Which company?" Marcus smiled. "I'll tell you later." Something passed across Claire's face. Not suspicion exactly, perhaps annoyance. Then Marcus began talking about their plans after marriage. They were renting a townhouse, but he wanted to buy a house within the year. "Probably west of the city," he said. Richard nodded. "Good schools out there." Claire put down her fork. "We haven't decided anything. We've discussed it. We've looked online. That counts as discussing it." She smiled, but I could see she was uncomfortable. Marcus continued describing neighborhoods where houses regularly sold for $700,000 or more. I knew enough about his business to find that surprising. Claire's income was respectable, but she wasn't wealthy. And unless Marcus's company had improved dramatically, I couldn't understand how they planned to afford the lifestyle he was describing. Then Richard said something that made every sound around me seem to fade. "Well, Marcus, I'll give you credit. Starting marriage with a strong financial foundation makes everything easier." Marcus smiled. "Absolutely." Richard turned toward me. "And Naomi, you and Charles obviously taught him something about planning ahead." I forced a smile. "Charles certainly believed in planning." Richard raised his glass slightly. "Marcus mentioned he'll be able to make a substantial contribution toward their future home when the time comes. That gives them an advantage most young couples don't have." My fork stopped. Across the table, Claire lowered her eyes. Marcus reached for his water. "A substantial contribution?" I asked. The words escaped before I could stop them. Marcus looked at me. "Mom." Richard's smile faded. "I hope I didn't mention something private." "No," Marcus said quickly. It's fine. Claire looked between us. What's wrong? Nothing, Marcus said. I spent 27 years working in payroll offices. I had seen employees trying to explain missing hours, managers trying to make overtime budgets fit, people trying to tell stories around numbers that refused to cooperate. Marcus had that look. I kept my voice calm. I simply didn't realize Marcus had put that much aside. He smiled. I've been doing better than you think. Maybe that was true. I wanted it to be true. But if business was doing so well, why had he spent weeks trying to gain access to my savings? I didn't challenge him at the table. Claire's parents had done nothing wrong. Neither had Claire as far as I knew. I finished dinner. I smiled through dessert. I even hugged Susan goodbye. Then I waited in the parking lot until Claire left with her parents to look at some wedding decorations Susan had stored at their hotel. Marcus was walking toward his car when I called his name. He stopped. What was Richard talking about? His shoulders dropped slightly. Mom, please. Please, what, not tonight? Why, the wedding is in 12 days. Everybody is stressed. I'm not asking everybody. I'm asking you. He looked toward the restaurant. I told them Claire and I would be in a good position when we decide to buy. That isn't what Richard said. It was dinner conversation. He said you could make a substantial contribution. I can. With what Marcus stared at me. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he said, my business is doing fine. Then why are you so interested in my savings? His expression hardened. We're doing this again. Yes, I'm trying to help you organize your finances. I didn't ask you to organize them. You didn't have to. That doesn't answer my question. He rubbed his forehead. Mom, I have enough pressure right now. And somehow my bank account is part of that pressure. It isn't. Then explain what Richard meant. Marcus sighed. I have assets. What assets? My company. What else? He looked away. Future interests. I felt cold. What does that mean? You know exactly what it means. No, Marcus. I want you to tell me. He looked back at me. You and Dad always said everything you built would eventually be mine. There it was. Eventually. A word that suddenly felt like a door opening into a room I did not want to enter. Your father and I said you were our beneficiary. Exactly. That doesn't mean you own anything now. I never said I did. You just described my estate as one of your future interests. You're twisting my words. Am I? His voice lowered. Why are you acting like we're strangers negotiating a business deal? Because you're talking about my money as if it already belongs on your balance sheet. His jaw tightened. I'm your only child. I know. Who else would it go to? That isn't the point. It matters. Not while I'm alive. The words came out harder than I intended. Marcus flinched. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? He stepped closer. I mean, everything I'm building eventually benefits the family, my company, the house Claire and I buy. Someday there could be grandchildren. And there's no reason for us to pretend your money and my future are completely unrelated. My money, his future. I heard the connection clearly now. I'm still using my future Marcus. He stared at me. I would never want anything to happen to you. Then stop calculating what happens afterward. His face flushed. That's unfair. Is it? Yes. He opened his car door, then stopped. Dad wanted me taken care of. That sentence hit differently. Not because it was completely false. Charles did want Marcus secure. We both did. But Charles had never believed security meant removing every consequence from our son's life. I remembered something he once said during one of our estate planning conversations. We should leave Marcus security, Naomi. Not permission to stop thinking. I hadn't understood why Charles said it so firmly. Standing in that parking lot, I began to. Marcus got into his car. Before closing the door, he looked at me. You're turning this into something ugly. No, I said quietly. I'm trying to understand what it already is. He drove away. I sat in my own car for several minutes before starting the engine. When I got home, I didn't turn on the television. I went directly to my office. I opened the drawer containing my financial records and removed every folder Marcus might have seen: saving statements, CD records, investment summaries, insurance documents, trust correspondence. Nothing appeared missing, but several papers were out of sequence. Then I noticed something on one of the older saving statements. A faint gray line ran near the edge of the page. I had worked around office copiers for decades. I knew that mark. It looked like toner residue from a copy. I checked another document, then another. My heart began beating faster. Marcus had been in this room while I was grocery shopping. He knew the exact balance of an account I had never discussed with him. He was telling his future in-laws that he could make a substantial contribution toward an expensive house. And now he had described my estate as part of his future financial position. I sat at my desk and stared at Charles's photograph. For weeks, I had been asking myself whether Marcus was planning around his inheritance. That night, a more disturbing possibility occurred to me. Maybe my son wasn't merely waiting for an inheritance. Maybe he had already started spending it. And if Marcus had made financial promises based on money he did not own, I needed to find out exactly what he had promised and to whom. The hardest part of discovering that someone has crossed a boundary is realizing how many smaller boundaries you allowed them to cross first. The morning after that dinner, I woke before 6. For a few seconds lying in the dark, I forgot everything. Then I remembered Marcus standing in the parking lot. "You and Dad always said everything you built would eventually be mine." I got out of bed, made coffee, and carried it into the home office. Charles's photograph sat beside the lamp. It had been taken on our 35th anniversary. He was smiling at the camera, but his hand rested on my shoulder, as if even in a photograph he needed to make sure I was there. I sat down. Then I began going through years of financial records. At first, I was looking for evidence against Marcus. Instead, I found evidence against myself. There was a canceled check for $3,000 from 7 years earlier. Marcus had fallen behind on rent after losing a client. I remembered the phone call. "Just until next month, Mom." Then there was an $8,000 transfer. His consulting business had been short on payroll. Another payment, $11,600, covered what Marcus called an unexpected tax problem. There were smaller amounts too: $1,500, $2,000, $2,500. Individually, none of them seemed devastating. Together, they formed a pattern I had never wanted to calculate. I started writing the amounts on a yellow legal pad. After 5 minutes, I stopped. The total wasn't the point, the pattern was. Whenever Marcus experienced financial pain, he called home, and far too often, home answered with money. Charles had understood the danger years earlier. I had refused to. When Marcus was 29, he started his first serious business venture with 2 partners. They were confident. Too confident, according to Charles. They rented expensive office space before they had stable clients. They hired employees quickly. They bought new furniture and installed a polished conference room. Marcus took us there shortly after opening. He was so proud. I remember standing beside him while he showed Charles a glass-walled meeting room. "What do you think?" Charles looked around. "How many paying clients do you have?" Marcus laughed. "Dad, I'm asking. We have several prospects. Prospects don't pay rent." I nudged Charles. "Can't you just tell him it looks nice?" "It looks very nice." Marcus smiled. Then Charles added, "I hope the revenue looks better." Marcus's smile disappeared. I was furious with Charles on the drive home. "You embarrassed him." "I asked a business owner about his business. You could have been supportive." "I am supportive." That didn't sound supportive. Charles kept his eyes on the road. Naomi, applause and support aren't the same thing. 6 months later, Marcus arrived at our house unexpectedly. He looked exhausted. His company couldn't make payroll. How much? Charles asked. $22,000. I nearly dropped my fork. Marcus immediately began explaining. A client had delayed payment. Another contract was about to close. They only needed temporary breathing room. Charles listened without interrupting. Then he asked, "How much of your own money is still in the company?" Marcus frowned. "Everything I could put in." "How much, Dad?" "That's not the issue. It is if you're asking me for $22,000. Marcus gave him a figure. It was less than half what he wanted from us. Charles leaned back. So you want me to risk more money saving your company than you currently have at risk yourself? That's not fair. It's arithmetic. I hated that conversation. I hated seeing Marcus frightened. Eventually, Charles agreed to help, but he attached conditions. Marcus had to show him the books. The company had to cut expenses. And if revenue didn't improve within 3 months, the expensive office had to go. Marcus agreed. The business survived another year before closing. I thought the experience had taught him something. Charles wasn't so sure. A few months later, we were sitting at the kitchen table when he said, "We helped him avoid disaster." I'm not convinced we helped him understand it. He lost his company. I think he understands. I lost the company. He didn't absorb the consequences. What did you want him to do? Become homeless? Charles looked at me. That's what you always do. What turn any consequence into catastrophe? I was offended. I'm his mother. I know. And mothers help their children. Yes. Charles reached across the table. But sometimes helping means allowing the lesson to cost something. I pulled my hand away. You're too hard on him. No, Naomi. I'm afraid we're making life too soft around the places where he most needs to grow. At the time, I thought Charles was being severe. Years later, surrounded by those old checks and transfers, I finally understood what he had seen. Marcus had learned that financial mistakes created discomfort. Then his parents removed the discomfort. And I had continued doing it even after Charles became cautious. Once, while Charles was still alive, Marcus called me about a credit card balance. He owed nearly $6,000. He said business expenses had gotten mixed with personal expenses. I'll pay you back. I transferred the money without telling Charles. That memory embarrassed me now. Not because I had helped my son, because I had hidden it from my husband. I had known exactly what Charles would say. And rather than confront the possibility that he was right, I had protected Marcus from Charles's judgment too. After Charles died, it became easier. No explanations, no disagreements. If Marcus needed help, I could simply provide it. A mother helping her only child. That was the story I told myself. But sitting there that morning, I saw another version. I had become Marcus's private emergency fund. And every rescue had taught him that my resources were available whenever his weren't enough. Maybe entitlement doesn't always begin with greed. Sometimes it begins with repeated rescue. I wiped my eyes and opened the folder containing the Brooks family trust documents. Charles had handled most of our estate planning. I attended every meeting. I signed everything. Rebecca Lawson, our attorney, had explained the documents carefully. But Charles remembered details better than I did. After he died, Rebecca reviewed the estate plan with me again. I knew the essentials. I controlled my assets. Marcus was a beneficiary. The house and several investments were coordinated through the trust structure. Beyond that, I hadn't needed to think about the mechanics. Now I did. I began checking which documents Marcus might have seen. Then something near the printer caught my attention. A white sheet was partially hidden beneath a stack of envelopes. I pulled it out. At first I thought it was blank. Then I noticed faint toner marks. I opened the copier lid. Near the hinge was a tiny torn piece of paper, pale blue. My stomach tightened. I recognized the border from one of my bank statements. I returned to the desk and found the matching page. One corner was slightly damaged. It fit. I sat down slowly. There could still be an innocent explanation. Maybe Marcus copied something because he wanted to compare interest rates. Maybe he thought he was helping. But every innocent explanation led to the same question. Why hadn't he asked? I picked up my phone. My first instinct was to call him, demand the truth, ask whether he had copied my records. Then I remembered Charles. Facts first, Naomi. He used to say that whenever I became emotional about a financial decision, feel whatever you need to feel, but get the facts first. I put the phone down. Instead of calling Marcus, I called Rebecca Lawson. Her assistant answered. Lawson and Pierce, this is Naomi Brooks. My husband Charles Brooks and I were clients of Rebecca's. Yes, Mrs. Brooks. Of course. I need an appointment. Is this regarding the Brooks Family Trust? I looked at the papers covering my desk. Yes. Is there an emergency? I almost said no. No money had disappeared. No one had threatened me. My son was getting married. Everything looked normal from the outside. But normal was beginning to feel like a costume. I'm not sure I said, but I'd like to find out before it becomes one. Rebecca called me back 40 minutes later. Her voice was exactly as I remembered it. Calm, measured, impossible to rush. I told her about Marcus's questions, the CD balance, the disturbed statements, the copier, the wedding deadline, the comments about inheritance. She listened without interrupting. Then she asked, "Has Marcus asked you to sign anything?" "Not yet. Has he given you financial paperwork?" "He sent information about consolidating my savings." "Bring it." I may be overreacting. Possibly. Her answer surprised me. Then she added, "And if you are the documents will tell us that." Facts first. Charles would have liked her. I scheduled an appointment for the next morning. That evening, Marcus called. "Hey, Mom, did you think about the account I'm thinking?" "The timing matters." "Why?" A pause. "Rates can change. You keep mentioning timing, Marcus. I'm trying to protect your options. Does this have to happen before the wedding?" Another pause. "It would be better." "Why?" His voice hardened slightly. "Mom, do you trust me?" 6 weeks earlier, my answer would have come without hesitation. That night, I stared at Charles's empty chair. "I love you," I said. "That isn't what I asked." "I know." He exhaled. "You're acting strange lately." Maybe I was. For most of Marcus's life, whenever he came to me, frightened, I focused on making the fear disappear. Now I was asking what caused it. "I'll call you tomorrow." After we hung up, I printed every email and gathered every document Marcus had sent me. The next morning, I carried them into Rebecca's conference room in a large brown envelope. She spread the papers across the table. For almost 10 minutes, she said nothing. She read one document twice. Then she removed her glasses. "Naomi, what exactly did Marcus tell you this account was for?" "To consolidate my savings. He said he could help me manage it." Rebecca tapped the page. "That isn't what this says." My mouth went dry. "What does it say?" She turned the document toward me and pointed to a section filled with language I had barely noticed. "This receiving account is associated with an investment entity." I stared at her. "What entity?" Rebecca looked directly at me. "One your son controls." For several seconds, I couldn't speak. The question was no longer whether Marcus had crossed a boundary. The question was how far he intended to go and what he needed my money to save. For several seconds, I stared at. Rebecca had turned toward me. The words were written in perfectly ordinary legal language. Nothing was highlighted. Nothing said warning. There was no sentence announcing that my son was trying to take advantage of me. That was almost worse. "What does that mean?" I asked. Rebecca folded her hands on the conference table. "It means the account receiving your money is associated with an entity Marcus controls." I looked down again. "Is that illegal?" "Not necessarily." That answer surprised me. "So he can do this. He can ask you to transfer money anywhere he wants. You're an adult. You can voluntarily invest in your son's company, give him money, lend him money, or transfer money into an entity he controls. But he told me he was helping me consolidate my savings. That is the problem." She pointed to this paperwork. "This is not simply a new personal savings account where Marcus would be added for convenience. The documents describe moving funds into an investment structure." "Would the money still be mine?" Rebecca paused. "I would not advise you to sign this without a full explanation of the entity, its liabilities, its ownership structure, and exactly what rights you retain." That was attorney language, careful, precise. But I understood what she was telling me. Once the money moved, getting it back might not be simple. I felt heat rise into my face. "All $420,000. That is the amount listed." I looked away. Through the conference room window, downtown Richmond continued moving as though nothing had happened. Cars stopped at lights. A delivery truck pulled to the curb. Someone crossed the street carrying coffee. My world had tilted, yet everyone outside seemed to be having an ordinary Wednesday morning. Rebecca gave me a moment. Then she said, "Naomi did." Marcus explained why he wanted the full amount transferred. He said consolidation would make things easier. For you, yes. Did he discuss investment risk number, fees number, control number? Did he give you financial statements for this entity number? She nodded slowly. That concerns me. I swallowed. Could he take the money? I don't want to speculate beyond the documents. But if you voluntarily transfer funds into an entity, he controls your legal position, becomes more complicated than simply keeping money in accounts held in your own name. I thought about Marcus sitting at my kitchen table. I worry about you. I want to make things easier. We should handle this while it's still just us. I had heard affection. Now I heard urgency. Rebecca, why would he do this before the wedding? I don't know. He keeps saying the timing matters. That's something we need to understand. She reached for another document. Did Marcus prepare these himself? I don't think so. There's a financial services company referenced here. She wrote the name on a yellow pad. I'd like your permission to make some inquiries. About Marcus. About the entity and the proposed transaction. I won't accuse anyone of wrongdoing. I'm going to determine what these documents actually connect to. I nodded. Please. Then she asked something I hadn't expected. How much does Marcus know about your estate plan? I hesitated. He knows he's my only child. That isn't what I asked. He knows Charles and I created a trust. Does he know what's in it? I don't think so. Does he know the value? Not exactly. Does he know he's named as successor trustee? I looked at her. I assume so. Rebecca's expression changed slightly. You assume I thought we told him. She opened a thick file. After Charles died, I had become sole trustee of the Brooks Family Trust. Marcus was named successor trustee, the person expected to step in if I died or became unable to manage things myself. At the time that arrangement had seemed obvious. He was our son. Who else would we name? Rebecca scanned several pages. Has Marcus ever asked you directly about his role in the trust? No. Has he asked about distributions? No. Then let's not assume what he understands. Something in her voice made me uneasy. Why? Because people often misunderstand the difference between being a beneficiary, being a future trustee, and owning assets today. I thought about Marcus in the parking lot. Your money and my future aren't completely unrelated. He called my estate a future interest. Rebecca looked up sharply. Those exact words. Yes. When 2 nights ago, she leaned back. What was the context? I explained the dinner. Richard's comment about Marcus making a substantial contribution toward a future home. Marcus telling me he had assets. His reference to future interests. The reminder that everything Charles and I built would eventually be his. Rebecca listened without interruption. When I finished, she asked, has anyone contacted you about verifying Marcus's assets? Number a lender, number bank, num financial advisor. Num she made another note. What are you thinking? I asked. I'm thinking we need more facts. There it was again. Facts first. For the next hour, Rebecca walked me through the proposed transfer line by line. What disturbed me most was not what the papers said. It was what Marcus had left out. He had described the transaction as though I were moving money from one pocket to another. The documents described something very different. There were references to investment authority, entity management, potential restrictions. None of those things had appeared in my conversations with my son. I felt embarrassed. I worked with financial records for 27 years. I should have read this more carefully. Rebecca shook her head. Don't do that. Do what? Turn someone else's incomplete explanation into your failure. I looked down. He's my son. That's precisely why you didn't approach the paperwork as if it came from a stranger. That sentence stayed with me. Before leaving, I asked Rebecca whether I should confront Marcus. Not yet. Why? Because if there's a legitimate explanation, we should understand it before accusing him. And if there isn't, you should know what you're protecting yourself from before he knows you're asking questions. I didn't like the idea of investigating my own child, but I liked the idea of blindly signing even less. Rebecca promised to call as soon as she learned anything. I drove home feeling older than I had that morning. The house was quiet. I placed my purse on the kitchen counter and saw the wedding invitation attached to my refrigerator with a magnet. Marcus and Claire. Their names were printed in elegant navy lettering. I touched the edge of the card. In 11 days, my son was supposed to begin a new life. I wanted to believe he was simply frightened. Maybe his business was struggling. Maybe he intended to borrow the money temporarily. Maybe he had convinced himself that because I would eventually leave him something, using it early wasn't really taking anything from me. None of those explanations made his behavior acceptable, but they were easier to bear than the possibility that he had deliberately deceived me. Marcus called that afternoon. "Did you have a chance to look over the paperwork?" "Yes." My answer was technically true. "Good. I can come by tonight. For what, to go through it?" "I'm busy tonight." Silence. "You're busy." The surprise in his voice irritated me. "Yes, Marcus. I occasionally have plans. What about tomorrow? I'll let you know." Another pause. Then he said, "Mom, we really shouldn't keep delaying this." There it was again. Urgency. "Why not? I told you. The timing is better before the wedding. You've never explained why." He exhaled. "I don't want to do this over the phone." "Then explain it when you're ready." His voice softened. "I'm doing this for you." I closed my eyes. That sentence no longer comforted me. "I'll talk to you later." I ended the call. The next morning, Rebecca called before 9. I found something. My heart began pounding. What the entity connected to the receiving account appears to be tied to Marcus's consulting business. I gripped the phone. So he wanted me to put my savings into his company indirectly, yes. But there's more. I sat down. Rebecca continued. "I spoke with a financial professional who has had recent contact concerning Marcus's financial representations. I kept your information confidential." "What representations?" "He has apparently been asking questions about whether an expected trust distribution can be considered evidence of personal financial strength." I didn't understand immediately. Expected distribution. An inheritance. The word landed heavily. He's using my inheritance. He cannot use the trust itself. He doesn't control it. But he's telling people about it. It appears he may be describing his expected future interest as part of his overall financial position. I remembered Richard congratulating him. The expensive house. The business expansion. The wedding. Everything suddenly felt connected. Can he do that? He can tell people whatever he believes about his future inheritance. That doesn't make it an asset he owns today. I felt anger rise beneath my fear. Does Marcus have any legal right to my trust while I'm alive? No. Can he take control because he's successor trustee? Number, can he force distributions? Number, can he borrow against it? Not based simply on being your future beneficiary. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Then Rebecca became very quiet. "Naomi, I need to ask you something." "What?" "Do you know whether Marcus actually understands how Charles structured this trust?" I thought he did. I'm beginning to think he doesn't. Why? Because if Marcus is making financial promises based on what he expects to inherit, he may be assuming something that simply isn't true. My heart beat faster. "What?" There was a brief pause. Then Rebecca said the words that changed everything. "I don't think your son understands what Charles built." "I don't think your son understands what Charles built." Rebecca's words stayed with me long after she said them. I was sitting at my kitchen table holding the phone against my ear, staring at the place where Marcus had laid those transfer papers only days earlier. "What do you mean?" I asked. "I think we should discuss this in person." That frightened me more than if she had simply answered. "When I have an opening at 11, I'll be there." I arrived 20 minutes early. Rebecca's assistant offered me coffee, but I declined. My stomach already felt tight enough. When Rebecca finally opened her office door, she was carrying the thick blue folder containing our estate documents. "Come in, Naomi." I sat across from her. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she opened the folder. "Let's start with something simple. Marcus is your beneficiary." "Yes." "He is also currently named successor trustee." "Yes." "But neither of those things gives him ownership of your assets today. I understand that now." Rebecca nodded. When Charles died, you became sole trustee of the revocable portion of the Brooks family trust. You retain control over the assets under your authority. You can manage them, sell them, reinvest them, and within the terms of the trust and applicable law change future arrangements, including Marcus, including certain provisions concerning Marcus. I looked down at my hands. For years I had thought of the trust as something that belonged to the future, a folder for after I died, a collection of instructions someone else would eventually need. Now it felt very much alive. What exactly does successor trustee mean for him? It means that if you die, or if the conditions for incapacity under your documents are met, the named successor can step into the administrative role described by the trust. Administrative, yes. So he wouldn't simply own everything. No. I almost laughed. Not because anything was funny, because I suddenly remembered Marcus saying Dad wanted me taken care of with such confidence that I had unconsciously accepted his interpretation. Rebecca continued. A trustee manages assets according to the trust terms. A beneficiary receives benefits according to those terms. Those are different roles. And Marcus is both currently, yes. Is that unusual? No, parents often name an adult child as both successor trustee and beneficiary. Then what's the problem? The problem isn't the arrangement by itself. The problem is whether the person being given future control is demonstrating judgment consistent with that responsibility. I knew exactly what she meant. Marcus had copied my financial records. He had tried to move $420,000 into an entity connected to his business. He appeared to be representing an expected inheritance as part of his financial strength, and he had done all of it without giving me a complete explanation. My throat tightened. Charles trusted him. Rebecca was quiet. Did he? I looked up. What does that mean? Instead of answering, she turned several pages. Charles trusted Marcus as his son. That isn't necessarily the same as trusting every financial decision Marcus might make. I felt defensive immediately. Charles loved him. I know, very much. I know that too. Rebecca's voice softened. This isn't about whether Charles loved Marcus. Then she pulled a sealed envelope from a pocket inside the file. My name was written across the front. Naomi. I recognized the handwriting immediately. Charles. For a second I couldn't breathe. What is that something? Charles asked us to retain with your estate file, and during the last major review you both completed before his illness. Why haven't I seen it? You weren't supposed to receive it automatically. His instruction was that it should remain with the estate documents, unless concerns arose regarding Marcus's expectations or financial judgment. I stared at her. He wrote that he left instructions. My fingers trembled when Rebecca handed me the envelope. I ran my thumb across Charles's handwriting. 4 years. 4 years since I had seen him write my name. Do you want me to leave? Rebecca asked. No. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It wasn't a legal document. There were no witnesses, no formal language, just Charles. Naomi. If you are reading this, then something has probably happened that I hoped would never happen. I stopped. My eyes blurred. Rebecca pushed a box of tissues toward me without speaking. I continued. Charles wrote that he loved Marcus more than our son would probably ever understand. He wrote that Marcus had generosity, intelligence, charm, and ambition. Then came the sentence that broke me. But our boy sometimes mistakes having a safety net for having permission to fall. I covered my mouth. I could hear Charles saying it, not angrily, sadly. He wrote that he worried Marcus might someday begin planning around an inheritance rather than building independently of it. If that happened, Charles did not want me to punish him. He did not want me to disinherit him out of anger. He wanted me to protect myself first, and then, if necessary, protect Marcus from his own expectations. Near the bottom, Charles had written, "If he begins treating money, we earned as money, he has already earned change, who controls it before money controls him." I lowered the page. For a long time I couldn't speak. All the arguments Charles and I had ever had about Marcus came rushing back. Every time I accused him of being too hard, every time I quietly gave Marcus money, Every time Charles warned me that rescuing and helping were not always the same thing, he knew I whispered. Rebecca shook her head. He worried. There's a difference, a big one. Charles wasn't predicting that Marcus would betray you. He was acknowledging a pattern that somehow hurt more. Because she was right. Charles had not left behind some dramatic accusation. He had left me a warning born from years of watching our son, and years of watching me protect him. I read the letter again. Why didn't Charles tell me maybe he tried? That answer struck deeper than Rebecca could have known. He had tried. On the porch. At the kitchen table. After Marcus's first business failed, Charles had been telling me for years. I simply hadn't wanted to hear it. Tears slid down my face. I thought saying no meant I wasn't supporting Marcus. Rebecca waited. I thought Charles didn't understand what it meant to be a mother. You were both trying to protect your son. Charles was trying to prepare him, yes, and I was trying to keep him comfortable. Rebecca didn't answer. She didn't need to. I looked back at the letter. What can I change? Rebecca studied me carefully. Before we discuss that, I need to know whether you're asking because you're angry. I am angry. Then we shouldn't make permanent decisions based only on today's anger. I don't want to punish Marcus. What do you want? I thought about that. I wanted my son back. The boy who brought me deli sandwiches. The man who sat beside me after his father died. I wanted to believe this entire situation could be explained. But wanting something didn't make it true. I want my money protected. That's reasonable. And I don't want Marcus controlling everything if something happens to me while he's behaving this way. Rebecca nodded. That can be addressed. How we can amend your estate plan. The words sounded enormous. Disinherit him, no. Her answer came immediately. You don't have to remove Marcus as a beneficiary simply because you no longer believe he should serve as successor trustee. So those things can be separated. Absolutely. She explained that I could appoint an independent professional fiduciary to administer the trust if I died or became incapacitated. Marcus could remain a beneficiary. His future inheritance did not have to disappear, but his control could. I looked at Charles's letter. Change who controls it before money controls him. What about distributions? We can review those too. Could he receive everything at once? Under your current arrangement, there are circumstances where substantial distributions could eventually be made directly. My stomach tightened. And if he's already treating the inheritance like money he owns, then you may want safeguards. Rebecca explained options. Structured distributions. Independent management. Protections designed to prevent reckless decisions or creditors from consuming everything immediately. I listened carefully. For once, I wasn't asking how to make Marcus's life easier. I was asking what would happen if I stopped standing between him and consequences. Then another thought came to me. My power of attorney. Rebecca nodded slowly. Yes. Marcus is named. He is. If I became sick tomorrow, depending on the circumstances, that document could become very important. I felt cold. I want that reviewed too. We'll review everything. For nearly 2 hours, Rebecca explained my options. Nothing had to be vindictive. Nothing had to be dramatic. I did not have to destroy my relationship with my son. I simply had to stop giving him authority he had not earned. By the time I left Rebecca's office, the fear inside me had changed. I was still afraid of what Marcus was hiding, but I was no longer afraid of protecting myself. That afternoon, I sat at my kitchen table with Charles's letter beside me. The house was quiet. Sunlight fell across his handwriting. I read the final lines one more time. Love him enough to let him become the man he keeps telling us he already is. I cried then. Not because I wanted revenge, because I finally understood what Charles had been trying to tell me. Marcus had asked me to transfer my savings. I wasn't going to transfer $1. Instead, the following morning, I called Rebecca. I've made my decision. About what? The trust. I looked at the transfer papers Marcus had left on my table. Then I pushed them aside. I want to change the successor trustee. There was a short silence. And Marcus, he stays my son. I looked at Charles's letter. He can stay a beneficiary. My voice steadied. But until he learns the difference between expecting an inheritance and owning one, he will not control it. For the first time since this began, I knew exactly what document I intended to change. And Marcus had no idea. The next morning I woke up before sunrise with one thought repeating in my mind. I was going to change the trust. Not because I hated my son, not because I wanted to punish him, and certainly not because I wanted to keep every dollar away from him forever. I was changing it because I had finally understood something Charles had tried to teach me years ago. Love and control were not the same thing. I sat on the edge of my bed for several minutes before getting dressed. Charles's letter was still on my nightstand. I had read it so many times that morning that I could almost recite it. Love him enough to let him become the man he keeps telling us he already is. That sentence hurt, but it also gave me courage. At 9 o'clock I called Rebecca. I'm ready. Are you sure? Yes. I want you to be certain this isn't simply a reaction to Marcus. I'm certain. There was a pause. Then come in. I drove to her office carrying the blue trust folder and the original documents Marcus had asked me to sign. I left his paperwork in my car. I didn't want it anywhere near the meeting. Rebecca had prepared several drafts. The first change removed Marcus as successor trustee. In his place, we would appoint an independent professional fiduciary, someone with no emotional connection to me, no family expectations, no personal financial interest in my estate, someone whose only responsibility would be following the trust instructions. I stared at the document. This means Marcus would never control the trust, not automatically. What if I change my mind later? You can revisit the arrangement while you remain legally competent. I nodded. That mattered. I wasn't closing a door forever. I was closing a door until I knew who deserved the key. The second change concerned my financial power of attorney. Marcus had been listed as the person who could step in if I became incapacitated. That was harder to change. I had never imagined needing protection from the person I had chosen to protect me. Rebecca recommended appointing a professional fiduciary there as well, with a secondary person named as backup. I signed the first page, then the second. My hand shook slightly. Rebecca noticed. You can stop at any time. I know. I signed again. With each signature, I felt two emotions at once, relief and grief. It was strange. I had spent my entire life signing documents that represented progress, mortgage papers, college forms, insurance policies, business records. Now my signature was being used to create a boundary between myself and my own child. I hated that. But I hated the thought of waking up in a hospital one day and discovering Marcus had access to everything even more. Then we reached the distribution provisions. Rebecca explained that Marcus could remain a beneficiary. That was important to me. I wanted him to know that I had not stopped loving him. But I no longer wanted his future inheritance to function like a checking account waiting for him. The revised trust would provide for structured distributions rather than an automatic lump sum. Certain amounts could be distributed at designated stages. Other assets could remain protected under professional management. If Marcus experienced a legitimate hardship, the fiduciary could evaluate the request. But Marcus could no longer demand access simply because he believed the money was already his. I looked at Rebecca. What happens if he becomes financially responsible? Then he can benefit from the trust according to the terms you establish. So I'm not taking his inheritance away. No. I'm changing the way it reaches him. Yes, that distinction mattered enormously. I signed. When the final document was complete, Rebecca gathered the pages. Naomi, you should understand something. What you have done nothing wrong by making these changes. I looked down. I feel like I failed him. You didn't create this situation by protecting yourself. I helped create it. She was quiet. I think you contributed to the pattern, she said carefully. But that is different from causing your son's choices. I appreciated her honesty. I didn't want another person telling me everything was someone else's fault. Marcus had made his decisions. But I had made mine too. For years I had chosen comfort over confrontation. Now I was choosing truth. Before leaving, I asked Rebecca one final question. Will Marcus know immediately, not unless you tell him? I nodded. I didn't want to surprise him with a legal document if I could avoid it. But I also didn't want him manipulating me into changing it back before I understood what was happening. I want to give him one chance to tell me the truth. Rebecca looked at me carefully. That's your decision. I drove home feeling strangely calm. The $420,000 remained exactly where it had been. Untouched. Still mine. I did not transfer it. I did not invest it in Marcus's company. I did not give him access. And I didn't feel guilty about that. At least not yet. That afternoon, Marcus arrived without calling. I knew it was him because I heard his key in the front door, Mom in the kitchen. He walked in carrying a paper bag. I brought lunch. I smiled faintly. Thank you. He set the bag down. Then he looked at me. Did you sign the papers? There was no hello. No question about how I was feeling. No mention of the wedding. Straight to the money. No. His expression changed. What do you mean, no? I mean I haven't signed them. Why, I'm still reviewing everything. We've reviewed it. You reviewed it. He stared at me. Mom, this is becoming a problem. What problem? The transfer. I folded my hands. Why is it so important? He looked away. It's not important. You've asked me 4 times. Because I'm trying to help you. Then tell me why the money needs to move before your wedding. He didn't answer. I waited. The silence stretched. Finally, he said, there are financial things I have to take care of. What things? Business things. Is your business in trouble? No. The answer came too quickly. I watched him. Are you sure? Yes. Then why do you need my savings? I don't need them. You just said there are financial things you need to take care of. He rubbed his forehead. Mom, please. No. He looked at me. I had rarely said that word to him. Not with that tone. No what? No more vague answers. His face hardened. You're making this much more complicated than it needs to be, because you won't tell me the truth. I am telling you the truth. Then tell me why your company is connected to the account you want my money transferred into. He froze. I watched the color drain from his face. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. How did you find that out? That was all he said. Not, that's not true. Not, you misunderstood. How did you find that out? My heart sank. You didn't know I would ask questions, did you? He stepped away from the table. Who did you talk to? That's not important. It is to me. Why, he didn't answer. I looked at my son and saw something I had never seen so clearly before. Fear. Not concern for me. Fear for himself. I softened despite everything. Marcus, what is happening? He sat down. For a moment he looked 39 and 12 at the same time. I can fix it. Fix what? My business. I closed my eyes. There it was. The answer I had been afraid of. You told me your business was fine. It is fine. Then why do you need $420,000? I don't need all of it. You asked for all of it. I thought it would be easier. Easier for whom? He looked at me. For everyone. That phrase again. I almost laughed. Instead, I asked quietly, does Claire know? He looked away. No. My chest tightened. Does her family know? Not everything. What do they know? Marcus didn't answer. I waited. Finally, he said, they think I'm in a better position than I am. How much better? He rubbed his hands over his face. I told them we had enough for a down payment. Do you not right now? I felt my stomach turn. Marcus. I was going to fix it. With my money. With money that would eventually be mine anyway. He said it so quietly that for a moment I wished I had misheard him. Say that again. He looked at me. You and Dad built everything for me. No. His eyebrows pulled together. No. We built a life. We hoped you would benefit from it. That is not the same thing. He stood. You're acting like I'm some stranger trying to rob you. I'm acting like a mother who finally realized her son has been planning around money he doesn't own. His eyes filled with frustration. The wedding is in 9 days. I know. If you. I'm acting like a mother who finally realized her son has been planning around money he doesn't own. His eyes filled with frustration. The wedding is in 9 days. I know. If Claire finds out now, I stopped him. Claire deserves the truth. He stared at me. You'd ruin my wedding, no. My voice was steady. You did not hear me. I heard you. No, you didn't. I stood. I am not ruining your wedding. I am refusing to finance a lie you created. He looked wounded. You're my mother. Yes, you're supposed to help me. I have helped you. I pointed toward the folder on the counter. For years. His expression changed. I continued. And every time I rescued you, I told myself I was loving you. My voice broke. But maybe I was teaching you that you never had to solve anything yourself. Marcus looked down. Neither of us spoke. Finally, he whispered, So you're just going to let me fail? I felt tears gathering in my eyes. No. He looked up. I'm going to let you decide whether you're willing to become the man your father believed you could be. He shook his head. You sound just like Dad. For the first time in years, I didn't hear that as an accusation. I heard it as a compliment. Marcus left without taking the lunch he had brought. I stood at the window and watched him drive away. I wanted to run outside. I wanted to call him back. I wanted to transfer the money just to make the fear disappear. But I didn't. The next morning, Rebecca called. We need to talk about something else. What happened? I received information that suggests Marcus may have been relying on your future inheritance in more ways than we realized. My heart sank. How I can't give you every detail over the phone. Rebecca. She paused. Someone has been making financial representations about assets Marcus expects to receive after your death. I closed my eyes. The wedding was 9 days away. The money was still safe. The trust had been amended. But I suddenly understood that protecting my savings was only the beginning. Marcus had already built part of his future around money that was never his. And whatever happened next would force him to choose between telling the truth and watching the life he had constructed around a lie begin to collapse. Rebecca's words stayed with me for the entire drive to her office. Someone has been making financial representations about assets Marcus expects to receive after your death. I kept replaying that sentence, not because I didn't understand it, because I understood it too well. My son had not simply been thinking about an inheritance someday. He had apparently been using the expectation of that inheritance to support decisions he was making today. When I arrived at Rebecca's office, she was waiting for me in the same conference room where we had amended the trust. She looked more serious than usual. Sit down, Naomi. I did. What happened? Rebecca opened a folder. I made some inquiries after our conversation yesterday. I'm not going to give you information that would violate anyone's privacy, but I can tell you what appears to be happening. I nodded. Marcus's consulting company has been under financial pressure. I closed my eyes. How bad? Significant enough that he has been seeking additional financing. What kind? Short-term business financing, refinancing, and personal guarantees. I stared at her. But he told me his business was doing fine. I know, she continued carefully. One of his larger clients apparently reduced its relationship with the company several months ago. That created a cash flow problem. I remembered the phone call Marcus had taken outside my house. The pale face afterward. The joke about needing one big contract. Suddenly those moments had names. Cash flow. Debt. Risk. Fear. Rebecca continued. Rather than reducing his expenses immediately, Marcus appears to have tried to maintain the business at its previous level while finding new financing. How credit cards. Personal lines of credit. Short-term business obligations. I looked down at my hands. And the wedding. Rebecca didn't answer immediately. What about it? Was he spending money he didn't have? It appears that some wedding-related expenses were charged or financed rather than paid from available cash. I felt something inside me break. Not because my son had debt. Debt itself did not make someone dishonest. People lose jobs, businesses fail, unexpected expenses happen, families struggle. I could have understood that. What I could not understand was pretending everything was fine while quietly planning to use my savings to erase the consequences. He could have told me, I whispered. Yes, I would have listened. I know. I might have helped him make a plan. Rebecca looked at me. That's different from giving him $420,000. I nodded. She was right. I had spent years believing the only two choices were rescue or abandonment. There had always been another choice. Help without surrender. Support without handing over control. Guidance without writing a check. But Marcus had never asked for that. He had asked for my money. I thought about Claire. Does she know not everything? Does she know he's struggling? I can't tell you exactly what she knows. But it appears she did not have a complete picture. I felt sick. She thinks he's successful. Apparently. Her parents think he's successful. Apparently. And he's been talking about buying a $700,000 house. Yes. I leaned back. Why would he do this? Rebecca gave me a sad smile. That is a question only Marcus can answer. I knew the answer. At least part of it. He was afraid. Afraid of being exposed. Afraid of disappointing Claire. Afraid of losing the image he had built. Afraid that if he admitted the truth, people would discover he wasn't the successful businessman he claimed to be. But fear didn't excuse deception. It only explained it. Rebecca turned another document toward me. This is the part that concerns me most. I looked down. It was not a loan document. It was a summary of information apparently provided during a financial discussion involving Marcus. Under assets and anticipated resources, there was a reference to future family wealth, not the exact value of my trust, not a formal statement from me, but enough to suggest Marcus had represented himself as having access to substantial inherited wealth in the future. I felt a strange numbness. He told them he was going to inherit, essentially, but he doesn't own it. No. And he doesn't control the trust. No. And I can change the trust. Yes. I looked at Rebecca. Then why would a lender believe him? Because future inheritance can sometimes be discussed as part of someone's overall financial picture, depending on the context. But it is not the same as owning the asset. I understood. Marcus had found a gray area. He had taken something that might happen someday and used it to make today look stronger than it was. That was exactly what Charles had warned me about. He was turning a safety net into permission. I sat quietly for several minutes. Then I asked, how much does he owe? Rebecca hesitated. I don't have a complete accounting, but you know enough. I know enough to understand why he wanted liquidity. How much? She gave me a range. I stared at her. The amount wasn't identical to my $420,000, but it was close enough to make my heart pound. The transfer wasn't about helping me manage my savings. It was about creating enough cash to stabilize a financial situation Marcus had hidden. I was going to use my money to refinance his debt. That appears likely. I looked out the window. For years I had believed Marcus was trying to protect my future. He was trying to protect his present. There was another piece I couldn't stop thinking about. The wedding. Why before the wedding? Rebecca answered carefully. Possibly because after the wedding his financial circumstances become more visible to Claire. I understood immediately. Marcus was trying to get his finances stabilized before he married her. Not because marriage itself changed my accounts. Because marriage changed who would be looking closely at his life. He wanted to enter that marriage without Claire seeing the cracks. And he wanted my money to patch them. I felt angry, then sad, then strangely compassionate. That was the problem with being a mother. Even when your child hurts you, you can still see the frightened child underneath the adult making terrible choices. I remembered Marcus at 13 standing in our kitchen after receiving a poor report card. He had lied about it for 2 weeks because he was afraid Charles would be disappointed. Charles eventually found out. Instead of yelling, he sat beside Marcus and said, "You can survive a bad grade. What you can't survive is building a life where you have to lie every time you're afraid." Marcus cried. Charles hugged him. I remembered thinking the lesson had worked. Maybe it had. Maybe Marcus simply forgot it. Or maybe I had spent years teaching him the opposite. Every time he became afraid, I made the fear disappear. Now he was 39 years old, facing consequences he had no idea how to handle. And his first instinct was to make his mother's money disappear into the problem. I drove home without stopping anywhere. Marcus called that evening. I let the phone ring once, twice. Then I answered. Hi, Mom. His voice sounded exhausted. Where are you home? I need to talk to you. Okay. There was a long silence. Then he said, I'm sorry about yesterday. I closed my eyes. Thank you. I shouldn't have pressured you. No. I just. He stopped. What? I'm running out of time. I said nothing. He continued. There are things happening with the business. Tell me. I can fix them. You keep saying that. I know. Are you in debt? Silence. My heart sank. Marcus. Yes. The word was barely audible. How much a lot? What does a lot mean? I don't know exactly. You don't know how much you owe. I know approximately. Then tell me. He exhaled. I have business debt, some personal debt, credit cards, and you're trying to use my savings to pay it. I was trying to create breathing room. By transferring all my savings, I would have protected it. With your company. He went silent. You know about that? Yes. Who told you? That doesn't matter? It matters to me. What matters to me is that you lied. I didn't lie. You told me the money was for my benefit. I thought it would help everyone. No, Marcus, you needed it. I needed time. You needed money. Yes. He finally said it. Not angrily, not defensively, just quietly. Yes. I sat at the kitchen table. Why didn't you tell me? I was ashamed. That answer stopped me. Of what? Everything. His voice cracked. The business isn't what I told people it was. The wedding costs got out of control. Claire thinks we're in a much better position than we are. Her parents think I can help with the house. I closed my eyes. You could have told the truth. I was going to when, after the wedding. I felt my chest tighten. After you married her, I thought I could fix everything before then. With my money. Yes. The honesty hurt almost as much as the deception. Marcus, did you ever think about what would happen to me if I gave you everything? I wasn't taking everything. You asked for $420,000. I knew you had other assets. There it was. The sentence I had feared most. He knew. He knew about the house. I knew about the trust. He knew enough about my financial position to assume that losing $420,000 wouldn't destroy me. And somewhere along the way, my son had stopped seeing my savings as money I had earned through decades of work. He saw it as available family capital. I whispered, You were counting on my death. He immediately said no. But you were counting on my inheritance. That's different. No. My voice broke. It isn't. He was silent. I heard him breathing on the other end. Then he said something I would remember for the rest of my life. I wasn't taking it, Mom. I was using it early. I stared at the wall. There it was. The truth. Not that he wanted my money. Something deeper. He believed the money was already his. He simply thought I was making him wait too long to use it. I didn't yell. I didn't insult him. I didn't threaten to disinherit him. I just said, That is exactly why your father was worried. Marcus became quiet. Then I heard him whisper, I know. And for the first time, I wasn't sure whether he was saying he understood Charles's warning or whether he was finally realizing how much trouble he was in. For several seconds after Marcus said, I know neither of us spoke. I could hear the faint sound of traffic through his phone. A car horn, someone talking in the background. Then Marcus whispered, Mom, please don't tell Claire. My eyes closed. That was his first concern. Not the debt, not the deception, not the money he had tried to move. Claire. I'm not responsible for keeping secrets from your future wife, I said. You don't understand. I understand enough. If she finds out now, the wedding is over. Maybe. He breathed sharply. Mom. I waited. Then he said, I can fix this. You've said that before. This time I mean it. Then start by telling the truth. Silence. I'm not ready. Then you're not ready to fix it. I became frustrated. You make it sound so simple. No. I'm saying it is necessary. You have no idea what this will do to me. I looked at Charles's photograph on the shelf. Your father used to say that the truth can hurt you once, but a lie makes you pay interest. Marcus gave a bitter laugh. That sounds like Dad. It is. I can't believe you're doing this. Doing what? Turning on me. The accusation hurt. Marcus, I am not turning on you. You changed the trust. I froze. How do you know that? He didn't answer. My heart began pounding. Who told you I know you met with Rebecca? I sat up straighter. How you left the folder in your car. I remembered. The blue folder. I had carried it into the house after my meeting and left it on the passenger seat while I went inside. Marcus must have seen it when he stopped by. You looked through my car, no. Then how did you know I saw the documents? I stared into the darkness outside my kitchen window. For weeks, Marcus had been stepping over boundaries so quietly that I kept questioning myself. Now he wasn't even pretending. What did you expect me to do? I asked. I expected you to talk to me first. I tried. You accused me. I asked you questions. You didn't trust me. You gave me reasons not to. His voice rose. I'm your son, and I'm your mother. The words came out louder than I intended. Then the house became silent. I had not shouted at Marcus in years. My chest hurt. I have spent my entire life loving you, I said. I have defended you when your father was worried. I have helped you financially when you were struggling. I have covered mistakes you should have handled yourself. I never asked you to do all that. That sentence stunned me. You're right. He went quiet. I made those choices, I continued, and I accept that. But you don't get to turn my choices into an obligation. I never said you owed me. You asked me to transfer my savings because I needed help. Then ask for help. I did. No. You asked for control. I wasn't trying to control you. You wanted $420,000 moved into an entity you control. I would have paid it back. With what I would have figured it out. That isn't a repayment plan. He said nothing. I wiped my eyes. I love you too much to keep pretending this is normal. His voice softened. Mom, please. I'm listening. I'm scared. That one word nearly broke me. Because underneath everything, under the debt, the wedding, the lies, the pressure, I heard my son. Not the businessman. Not the man trying to impress Claire's family. My son. The frightened boy who used to hide bad report cards under his mattress. I wanted to save him. Every instinct inside me screamed to save him. I could transfer enough money to cover the most urgent debts. I could call Rebecca and change the trust back. I could tell Claire that Marcus had made a mistake but was fixing it. I could make the entire crisis disappear. But then I remembered Charles's letter. Love him enough to let him become the man he keeps telling us he already is. I took a breath. I'm sorry you're scared. He began crying quietly. So help me. I will. Then give me the money. I closed my eyes. No. His crying stopped. What I said, no. You just said you would help me. I will help you face this. That's not helping. It is. No, Mom. You know what happens if I don't get the money. Tell me. He hesitated. The business could collapse. Then we deal with the business. The wedding could collapse. That is between you and Claire. My reputation, that is yours to rebuild. He became angry again. You don't understand what you're doing. I understand exactly what I'm doing. You're choosing money over your son. The sentence struck me so deeply that I had to put the phone down for a second. When I picked it up, my voice was quieter. No, Marcus. I looked at Charles's photograph. I'm choosing my son over the version of him that needs my money to survive. He said nothing. I continued. If I transfer that money, your business problem disappears for a few months, maybe a year. Then what I'll do better? Maybe. You don't believe me. I believe you want to do better. That's not enough, no. He sounded defeated. What do you want from me, the truth? I told you the truth, not all of it. What else is there? I thought about Claire. About Richard and Susan. About the future house. About the financial representations Marcus had made. Have you told Claire about the debt? No. Have you told her you used your future inheritance as part of your financial story? No. Have you told her that you asked me to transfer $420,000 into your business structure? No. He sounded ashamed. I was going to. When I don't know. That's what I thought. I could hear him breathing heavily. Then he said, if I tell her she'll leave me, maybe she will. You don't care. I care very much. Then why would you let that happen? Because Claire deserves to choose the life she wants, honestly. There was a long silence. Finally, Marcus said, "You sound like Dad." "I know. I hate that. I know." Then he hung up. I sat there with the phone in my hand. I expected to feel victorious. I didn't. I felt devastated. A mother isn't supposed to feel relieved when her son stops talking to her. But beneath the grief was something else. A strange, painful clarity. For the first time, I had said no without immediately preparing to say yes later. I didn't chase him. I didn't call back. I didn't transfer the money. The next morning, I called Rebecca. I told Marcus no. I'm glad. He knows about the trust amendment. Then we need to finish the remaining paperwork and make sure the records are properly updated. I nodded. There was one more thing I needed. I want everything documented clearly. It will be. And I want Marcus removed as successor trustee. He already has been through the amendment. I want the power of attorney finalized too. It is. I felt a weight lift from my chest. Not because I wanted Marcus powerless, because I wanted myself protected. Then Rebecca asked, "Are you considering disinheriting him?" "No." She paused. "Why not?" "Because this isn't about punishing him. What is it about responsibility?" I thought about Charles. He can still inherit. I just don't want him controlling everything. Rebecca smiled slightly. That is a very important distinction. That afternoon, I received an email from Marcus. I almost didn't open it. The subject line said, "I'm sorry." Inside was a short message. He apologized for pressuring me. He admitted that he had been looking at my financial statements. He admitted that he believed his future inheritance would eventually solve his financial problems. Then he wrote something that made me stare at the screen for several minutes. I convinced myself that because you would leave it to me someday, using it now wasn't really stealing. I read that sentence twice, then a third time. He had finally put into words what I had been afraid of. The money had become psychologically his before it ever became legally his. I replied with only one sentence. "I love you, but I will not finance a life built on something you do not own." Then I closed my laptop. That evening, I walked into the guest room where some of Charles's belongings were still stored. I opened an old box. Inside were photographs, receipts, business cards, and a handwritten note Charles had once left on the kitchen counter. It was from years earlier. He had written, "Never confuse rescuing someone with loving them." I sat on the floor and cried. For years I had thought boundaries were walls. That night I realized they could also be bridges. A bridge between the person someone had become and the person they still had a chance to become. 2 days later, Marcus came to my house. He looked exhausted. His suit was wrinkled. His hair was uncombed. He stood on the porch without knocking. When I opened the door, he didn't ask about the money. He didn't mention the trust. He simply said, "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. He walked into the kitchen. For a moment, he looked at the table where he had first placed the transfer papers. Then he looked at me. I was wrong. I said nothing. "I don't know how to fix everything. That's okay." His eyes filled with tears. I thought if I could just get through the wedding, everything would work out. I nodded. That's what people tell themselves when they're afraid. I wanted Claire to see me the way I wanted to see myself. That's not sustainable. I know. He sat down. Then he whispered, "Dad was right." My heart broke. What did he say? Not one specific thing. Marcus looked down. He was always trying to make me understand that being successful isn't looking successful. I sat across from him. "What are you going to do? I don't know yet." "That's okay." He looked surprised. "You're not going to tell me what to do, no." "Why?" "Because this time you need to decide." He nodded slowly. Then he said, "I'm going to tell Claire." My heart tightened. That's the right thing. I'm terrified. I know. He looked at me. "You really won't give me the money?" I took a slow breath. "No." His eyes closed. Then he nodded. "Okay." It was the smallest word, but it was the first word my son had said that sounded like responsibility. And although I didn't know what the next few days would bring, I knew one thing. I was no longer going to rescue Marcus from the consequences of his choices. If he wanted his life back, he would have to build it himself. And that meant the wedding and the truth behind it was about to change everything. The day Marcus told me he was going to tell Claire the truth, I believed him. Maybe that was the last piece of hope I still had. Not hope that he would magically become responsible overnight. Not hope that his business problems would disappear. Just hope that after everything he would finally stop running from the truth. For the first time in weeks, I slept through the night. The next morning I woke to sunlight coming through the curtains and realized I wasn't thinking about my bank account. I was thinking about my son. What would happen when Claire learned everything? Would she leave him? Would the wedding be cancelled? Would Marcus finally understand that the consequences he feared were not caused by me? I didn't know. But I had made my decision. I would not interfere. That afternoon Marcus called. I told her. My heart tightened. "You told Claire yes. How did she react?" she cried. I closed my eyes. "What did you tell her?" "Everything." I waited. He took a breath. "I told her about the business debt, the credit cards, the refinancing, the money I asked you for, and the inheritance, yes, and the house, yes." "What did she say?" "She asked me why I lied." I swallowed. "What did you tell her?" "The truth." "What was the truth?" Marcus was quiet for several seconds. That I was embarrassed. I sat down. He continued. "I was afraid she'd think I was a failure. Her parents are successful. She grew up around people who knew how to handle money. I thought I had to prove I belonged in their world. I understood that more than I wanted to. Not the lying, the insecurity underneath it. Marcus had spent years trying to convince people he was more successful than he felt. Then he met Claire and discovered a world where appearance alone wasn't enough. Instead of becoming honest, he doubled down. And when that became impossible, he looked toward the one place he knew there was money. Me. "What did Claire say about the wedding?" I asked. "She wants to postpone it." I nodded slowly. "I'm sorry. You're not surprised?" "No. I thought you would tell me not to let her." "Why would I?" "Because you want me to be happy." "I do. But you don't think I should marry her right now." "I think you both deserve to decide with the truth." He was quiet. Then he said, "She asked whether you knew." I knew something was wrong. "Did you know how bad it was?" "No." "Did you know I was using your inheritance when I talked about our future?" "No." "I'm sorry." "I know. I'm really sorry." "I believe you." Those words seemed to surprise him. Then he said, "I have another problem." "What?" "The bank." My stomach tightened. "What about it?" "They want additional information about my financial position." I knew immediately where this was going. "Are they asking about the trust they already have?" "Questions." "Marcus." "I didn't give them anything new." "Good." "I told them I was expecting an inheritance." I closed my eyes. Expecting isn't owning. I know that now. Do they understand that I don't know? I told him he needed professional advice, not from me, not from a friend, not from someone who would tell him what he wanted to hear. He needed someone who could examine the business honestly. He agreed. 2 days later, Marcus asked if I would attend a meeting with a financial advisor. I hesitated. "Why me?" "Because I need someone who knows the full picture." "You need someone who knows the full picture of your business." "I know. And I'm not giving you money." "I know." I looked at the calendar. The wedding had been postponed. The house search was paused. Marcus's world had stopped moving forward. Maybe that was exactly what he needed. "I'll come," I said. He thanked me. The meeting was scheduled at an office in Richmond. Marcus arrived first. I came with Rebecca. When we entered the conference room, Marcus looked surprised. "Mom, I told you I would come. You didn't say Rebecca was coming. I didn't think you'd mind." He looked uncomfortable. "I don't." The financial advisor, a man named Daniel, greeted us and introduced himself. He had already reviewed some of Marcus's business information. We sat around a large conference table. Daniel began with a simple question. "What is your current financial position?" Marcus started answering, then stopped. He looked at the papers in front of him. Daniel waited. Marcus finally said, "I'm not sure." That answer seemed to change the entire atmosphere. Daniel nodded. "That's okay. We'll establish it." For the next 40 minutes, they reviewed debt liabilities accounts, receivable business expenses, and outstanding obligations. There were no dramatic accusations, no shouting, just numbers. And numbers did something emotional arguments never could. They refused to lie. Marcus had been carrying more debt than he admitted. His company had revenue, but cash flow was unstable. Several expected contracts had not materialized. The wedding expenses had added another layer of pressure. And the proposed transfer from my savings would not have solved everything. It would have bought time, that was all. Daniel looked at Marcus. If your mother transferred the full amount, you would still need a restructuring plan. Marcus nodded. I understand. And if you used those funds to cover existing obligations without changing your business model, you could be back in the same position later. Marcus looked down. I understand. Rebecca finally spoke. There is another issue. Daniel turned toward her. Marcus has represented his expected inheritance as part of his future financial strength. Marcus looked embarrassed. Rebecca continued. He is not the current owner of those assets. The trust has been amended and he is no longer successor trustee. Daniel looked at Marcus. Is that accurate? Yes. The word was barely audible. Daniel nodded. Then we should remove anticipated inheritance from your current financial assumptions. Marcus rubbed his hands together. Can I ask something? Of course. If I hadn't changed anything, would I have eventually received the trust? Rebecca answered. Possibly, depending on the terms and circumstances. But an inheritance is not guaranteed merely because someone expects it. Marcus looked at me. I could see the question in his eyes. I answered before he could ask. I haven't disinherited you. His shoulders dropped slightly. You haven't, no. Then why change it? I took a breath. Because you were treating future money like present money. He looked down. I know. And because your father warned me. Marcus's eyes lifted. About me, about the possibility that you would plan your life around an inheritance instead of building one. His face tightened. Did he really write that? Yes. Can I see it? I hesitated. Then I handed him a copy. He read it silently. His eyes moved slowly across the page. When he reached the line about not letting money control him, his mouth tightened. He read the page again, then he put it down. I thought Dad didn't believe in me. My heart hurt. He believed in you enough to think you could stand on your own. Marcus stared at the paper. For several minutes, nobody spoke. Finally, Daniel cleared his throat. If I may say something. Marcus nodded. You don't have an inheritance problem. Marcus looked at him. You have a cash flow problem, a debt problem, and a trust problem in your relationship. Marcus swallowed. But those are problems you can actually solve. I looked at my son. That was the first time someone had spoken to him about his situation without trying to shame him or rescue him. Daniel helped him outline a plan. Sell the expensive vehicle, reduce business overhead, close the office if necessary, negotiate outstanding debts, stop charging personal expenses to the company, pause the house purchase, and most importantly, stop treating future money as part of current income. Marcus wrote everything down. No excuses, no arguments, just notes. When the meeting ended, Marcus stayed seated. He looked exhausted, but somehow he also looked lighter. Outside, we stood on the sidewalk. Marcus turned to me. You really changed the trust. Yes. You removed me as trustee. Yes. And you still left me something. Yes. Why? Because I'm your mother. He looked confused. I thought you were angry. I am. He looked down. But anger isn't the only thing I feel. I touched his shoulder. I love you. He nodded. I love you too. Then understand this. He looked at me. Love doesn't mean I hand you whatever you ask for. I know. Love means I tell you the truth even when it hurts. He nodded again. Then he whispered, I think I needed that. I hugged him. It wasn't the warm, easy hug from before all of this. There was sadness in it, and caution, but there was also something new, honesty. When I got home that evening, I placed Charles's letter back inside the trust folder. I had spent weeks thinking the document I changed was about money. It wasn't. It was about control. Marcus had wanted me to transfer my savings because he believed that money could rescue him. Instead, I had changed the document that determined who would control the family assets after I was gone. And for the first time, Marcus understood why. I had not taken his future away. I had taken away his assumption that the future belonged to him before he had earned it. The wedding was postponed. The house was off the table. His business was being rebuilt from the ground up. And my $420,000 remained exactly where it belonged. In my accounts. Under my name. Safe. But I knew the hardest conversation was still ahead. Claire had learned the truth. Now Marcus had to decide whether he was willing to build a life with her without pretending to be someone he wasn't. And if he couldn't, no amount of money mine or anyone else's could save that marriage. The wedding did not happen. At least not on the date printed on those beautiful Navy invitations. 3 days after Marcus told Claire everything, I received a phone call from her. I almost didn't answer. Her name appeared on my screen, and for a moment I simply stared at it. I knew she had every reason to be angry with me. She could have believed I had encouraged Marcus's behavior. She could have blamed me for making the situation worse. She could have decided that I was the mother who refused to help her son when he needed her most. Instead, when I answered, her voice was quiet. Naomi. Hi, Claire. Do you have a minute? Of course. There was a long pause. Then she said, I don't know who else to ask. My heart tightened. Ask me anything. I need to understand what happened. I sat at my kitchen table. The same table where Marcus had first placed the transfer papers. What part? All of it. I waited. Claire took a shaky breath. Marcus told me he was doing well financially. He told me that too. I know. Her voice cracked slightly. He said the business was growing. He said we would be able to buy a house after the wedding. He told my parents he had family assets behind him. I closed my eyes. I didn't know he had been saying all of that. I believe you. That surprised me. Why? Because if you knew, I think you would have tried to help him. I looked down. She knew me better than I expected. I probably would have tried to help. Did he ever tell you he was in debt? No. Did he tell you how much? No. Did he tell you he was using your inheritance in his plans? No. He says he wasn't. I frowned. What do you mean? He says he never thought he owned it. He says he thought of it as something that would eventually be his. I took a slow breath. That's what he told me. And that scares me. It scares me too. Claire became silent. Then she asked the question I knew was coming. Did he ever actually have that money? I looked toward the window. No. Not even part of it, no. Then why did he talk like it was available? I answered honestly. Because for years I helped him whenever he was afraid. Claire didn't interrupt. I thought I was being a good mother, I continued. When his business struggled, I helped. When he had unexpected expenses, I helped. When he made mistakes, I softened the consequences. I swallowed. I never realized how much that could teach him. What? That I would always be there to make the problem disappear. Claire's voice became softer. That isn't your fault alone. I know. But it isn't his fault alone either. I was surprised. You're defending him, no? She paused. I'm trying to understand him without excusing him. That sentence stayed with me. It was exactly what I had been struggling to do. I loved Marcus. That didn't make what he had done right. But neither did his mistakes make him incapable of becoming better. Claire continued. My parents are furious. I'm sorry. They feel deceived. They have every right. They were already talking about helping us with the house. My stomach tightened. Were they? Yes. And Marcus knew that yes. That explained more than I wanted to know. Marcus hadn't simply wanted to impress Claire. He had wanted to impress her family. He wanted them to believe he belonged among people who had already achieved the financial stability he was pretending to have. What happens now? I asked. I postponed the wedding. I know. I don't know if I'm ending it. I remained quiet. I love him, Claire said. I know, but I don't know if I can trust him. That's something only you can decide. Did you trust him? The question hurt. I trusted the son, I remembered. And now I thought about the transfer papers, the financial statements, the trust amendment, the lies. I'm learning how to trust the man he is becoming. Claire began crying. I could hear her trying to control her breathing. I'm afraid if I stay, I'll always wonder what else he's hiding. That's understandable. And I'm afraid if I leave, I'll regret giving up on him. That's understandable too. There was no perfect answer. I knew that. Marriage was not a reward for good intentions. Love was not an obligation to remain when trust had been broken. And forgiveness did not require pretending nothing had happened. Claire finally said, I'm not asking you to tell me what to do. Good. She laughed softly through her tears. I thought you might say that. I can tell you what I believe. What I believe Marcus needs to learn to stand without you or me holding him up. She was quiet. And if he does, then you'll have something real to build on. She thanked me before hanging up. For several days afterward, Marcus worked with Daniel and Rebecca to stabilize his financial situation. The changes were painful. He sold the expensive vehicle he had bought partly because it made him feel successful. He closed the downtown office. He moved his business into a smaller workspace. He canceled several unnecessary subscriptions and stopped charging personal expenses to the company. He called creditors. Some agreed to restructuring, others did not. There were embarrassing conversations. There were moments when Marcus wanted to quit, but he kept going. I knew because he occasionally called, not asking for money, asking questions. Mom, do you know anyone who can help me understand this contract? Or do you remember what Dad did when a client refused to pay? Or is it normal to feel sick before calling a creditor? I smiled when he asked that last question. Yes. How do you know? Because your father once had to do it. He did more than once. That surprised him. Dad never told. Your father didn't tell you everything either. Maybe that was part of the problem. Maybe. The conversations were different now. Marcus no longer talked about what he would eventually have. He talked about what he could do now. That distinction mattered. One afternoon he stopped by my house. He looked tired but calmer. I made coffee. He sat at the kitchen table. Claire wants to meet next week. That's good. I don't know what she's going to say. You can't control that. I know. He smiled faintly. You keep saying that because you keep needing to hear it. He laughed. Then his expression became serious. Mom, I need to ask you something. What did you really change the trust because of me? Yes. Were you angry? Yes. He nodded. Did you remove me completely? No. His eyes lifted. I'm still a beneficiary. Yes. But I'm not successor trustee. No. Why I looked at him. Because I don't know whether you're ready to manage something that large. He nodded slowly. That's fair. I hadn't expected him to accept it so easily. Then he said I used to think being trustee meant Dad believed I was the responsible one. He did believe you could become responsible. That's different. Yes. Marcus looked down at his coffee. I think I confused being trusted with being entitled. I felt tears sting my eyes. That's a big thing to understand. I wish I had understood it sooner. So do I. He smiled sadly. I'm not asking you to change it back. I stared at him. You're not no. Why? Because if I ever get that responsibility, I want to know I earned it. I reached across the table and took his hand. That was the first moment since this began when I felt something inside me loosen. Not everything. Trust doesn't return because someone says the right sentence. But something had shifted. The following week, Claire came to my house with Marcus. She looked nervous. Marcus looked terrified. I made tea and left them alone in the living room. I didn't listen through the doorway. I didn't need to. Their conversation belonged to them. An hour later, Claire found me in the kitchen. We're not getting married next week. I know, but we're going to try. I smiled. Then try honestly. She nodded. We're going to counseling. That sounds wise. Marcus came into the kitchen. He looked at me. I told her everything. I know. Claire took his hand. We have a lot to work through. I know. Marcus looked at me. And I still have a lot of work to do. Yes. He laughed. You could pretend to disagree once in a while. I could. We all laughed. It wasn't a perfect moment, There was no dramatic reconciliation, no wedding music, no instant forgiveness. Just three people standing in my kitchen, trying to figure out what honesty looked like after deception. Later that evening, after they left, I walked into my office. Charles's photograph was still beside the lamp. I opened the trust folder. The amended document was there. My savings remained untouched. $420,000. Money I had spent decades earning and protecting. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty about keeping it. I understood something important. The money had never been the real conflict. The real conflict was the belief that love required me to remove every obstacle from my son's path. It didn't. Sometimes love means opening the door. Sometimes it means holding someone accountable. And sometimes the most loving thing a mother can do is stand still while her grown child learns to walk without reaching for her wallet. I closed the folder. Outside, the evening sky over Richmond was turning pink. I thought about the wedding that wasn't happening, the house that wasn't being purchased, the business Marcus was rebuilding, the marriage that might or might not survive. None of it was certain. But for the first time, uncertainty didn't frighten me, because the future was finally being built on truth. Not on my savings, not on an inheritance, not on appearances, truth. And whatever happened next, I knew I would rather have an honest son, struggling to rebuild his life, than a successful-looking son, who believed my death was part of his financial plan. The weeks after Claire postponed the wedding were harder than I expected. I thought the worst part would be watching Marcus struggle financially. It wasn't. The worst part was learning how difficult it was for me not to rescue him. For 68 years, I had measured love by what I could do for the people I cared about. If someone was hungry, I fed them. If someone was cold, I found a blanket. If someone was frightened, I tried to make the fear smaller. And when that frightened person was my son, I had spent decades reaching for my checkbook before I ever asked whether money was actually the answer. Now I had to learn a completely different kind of love, the kind that sometimes stood back. Marcus started making changes almost immediately. The first was selling his luxury vehicle. It was a beautiful car, too beautiful for what he could afford. He had purchased it because, as he later admitted, he wanted clients to see someone who had already made it. When he told me he had sold it, I asked what he was driving now. My old sedan, the one you hated. He laughed. The same one. I smiled. Your father would have liked that. Dad would have said I should have kept the sedan in the first place. He would have. Marcus laughed again. But the joke disappeared quickly. Selling the car didn't solve his problems. Neither did closing his downtown office. He moved his consulting business into a smaller workspace and began working from home several days a week. He canceled services he had once considered essential. He renegotiated contracts. He stopped taking clients simply because their names looked impressive. Most importantly, he started looking at the numbers. All of them. No hiding, no optimistic projections, no pretending that an unsigned contract was the same thing as money in the bank. Daniel helped him create a realistic cash flow plan. Rebecca remained involved only where the legal side required it. And I stayed out of the financial decisions. That was harder than any of them realized. There were mornings when Marcus would call and say, "I don't know what I'm going to do." And every cell in my body wanted to answer, "Come over, I'll help." Instead, I asked, "What are your options?" At first, he hated that question. Then he started answering it. "I can cut this expense. I can negotiate this debt. I can take another contract. I can delay the expansion." Slowly, the language changed. He stopped asking what I could do. He started asking what he could do. But progress was not a straight line. There were setbacks. One creditor refused to restructure a loan. A client canceled a contract Marcus had been counting on. Another payment arrived late. One Friday evening, Marcus called me sounding defeated. "Mom, I think I've ruined everything." I was standing in my kitchen washing dishes. "What happened?" "The numbers aren't working." "What did Daniel say?" "He says I need to cut more." "Then cut more." There was silence. "That's all you're going to say?" "What do you want me to say?" "I don't know." I dried my hands. "Marcus, I know this is painful. I feel like I'm drowning. I know. I could fix this if you would just—" He stopped. I waited. If I would just what? He sighed. Nothing. I knew what he had almost asked. Money. He knew I would not give it, and I knew that knowledge was painful for both of us. I love you, I said. I love you too. Then keep going. He was quiet. Finally he said, okay. That became our new language. Keep going. Not I'll fix it, not I'll pay it, not don't worry, just keep going. For several months Marcus and I spoke less than we ever had. Sometimes days passed without a call. Then a week. I told myself that distance was probably healthy. But mothers don't stop worrying because someone tells them not to. I checked my phone constantly. I wondered whether he was eating properly, whether he was sleeping, whether his business had collapsed, whether Claire had left him, whether he regretted telling the truth. I wanted to call. I didn't. I wanted to send money. I didn't. I wanted to ask Rebecca for updates. I didn't. I had finally realized that if Marcus was going to rebuild his life, I could not secretly manage the process from the sidelines. Then one Saturday morning, nearly 4 months after the wedding had been postponed, someone knocked on my front door. I knew it was Marcus before I opened it. He looked different. Not dramatically. I was still my son. But something about his face had changed. He looked older. Not in years. In experience. His clothes were simple. His shoes were worn. His hair was slightly longer than usual. He stood on the porch with his hands in his coat pockets. Hi, Mom. Hi. Can I come in? I stepped aside. He walked into the kitchen. His eyes immediately went to the table. The same chairs, the same place where he had once placed the transfer papers. He smiled sadly. I remember sitting here asking you to transfer everything. I remember. I was so sure I was right. I know. He pulled out a chair and sat. I made coffee. Neither of us spoke until I set the cup in front of him. He stared at it. I'm not here to ask you for money. I know. How? Because you would have started with the bank balance. He smiled. That's fair. Then his expression became serious. I came to apologize. I sat across from him. You've apologized before. I know. This sounds different. It is. He took a breath. I finally understand what I did. I waited. He looked down at his hands. I thought my problem was money. I said nothing. I thought if I could get enough money, everything would go back to normal. He laughed bitterly. There was never enough. I watched him carefully. My business wasn't successful the way I told people it was. I know. I was good at making it look successful. I know. I kept expanding because every time I felt like I was falling behind, I thought I needed something bigger. He swallowed. Bigger office, better car, better clothes, bigger clients, bigger wedding. He looked at me. I thought if everything around me looked successful, eventually I would feel successful. I felt tears gathering. But you didn't, I said. No. He looked down again. I felt like a fraud. The word hung between us. A fraud? Yes. He rubbed his eyes. I was terrified Claire would find out. I was terrified her parents would think I wasn't good enough for her. You could have told her. I know. You could have told me. I know. Why didn't you? He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, because you had always fixed things. I felt the words in my chest. I didn't even realize how much I relied on that. I looked away. That isn't entirely your fault. I know it isn't. He took a breath. But it isn't entirely yours either. That mattered. He wasn't blaming me. He wasn't blaming Charles. He wasn't blaming Claire. For the first time, he was looking directly at himself. Then he said something that made my heart stop. I started treating your death like part of my financial plan. I stared at him. He closed his eyes. I know how horrible that sounds. It does. I don't mean I wanted you to die. I know. I mean I mentally counted on money that would only exist after you were gone. He looked at me. And once I did that, your savings stopped feeling like your savings. My eyes filled with tears. They became my future. Yes. And I started thinking I was entitled to use them early. Yes. He nodded. I hate that I did that. I reached across the table. He took my hand. His fingers were trembling. I thought Dad's trust meant he believed I was ready. I believed you could become ready. Marcus smiled sadly. That's different. Yes. He looked toward the hallway where Charles's photograph hung. Do you still have his letter? Yes. Can I read it again? I went to the office and brought it back. Marcus read it slowly. When he reached the sentence about not letting money control him, his eyes filled. He knew. He worried. I wish I had listened. I wish I had. He looked at me. Did changing the trust hurt you? Yes. He nodded. I'm glad you did it. That surprised me. You are, yes. He folded the letter carefully. I'm not ready to manage something like that. You might be someday. Maybe. And if you are, he smiled, then I'll know it because I built something that doesn't depend on your money. I squeezed his hand. That's what your father wanted. I think I finally understand. We sat together for a while. No dramatic promises, no sudden restoration of trust. Just two people sitting across a kitchen table finally telling each other the truth. Before Marcus left, he stood near the front door. Mom. Yes, I don't know what will happen with Claire. I know. But we're talking. That's good. She says she needs time. She deserves it. He nodded. And I need time too. For what to become someone I can respect. I smiled through my tears. You've already started. He hugged me. It wasn't the desperate hug of a frightened son asking his mother to save him. It was different, steadier, longer. When he pulled away, he said, I love you. I love you too. He walked down the driveway. I watched him get into his old sedan. The car looked small compared with the luxury vehicle he once drove. But somehow seeing him behind that steering wheel made me prouder than I had felt when he first arrived at my house in that expensive car. Because this time, he was driving away with something that couldn't be bought. Responsibility. That evening I sat on the back porch. The same porch where Charles had once warned me that helping Marcus could someday mean refusing him. For years I thought that was a lesson about money. It wasn't. It was a lesson about love. I had spent years believing that protecting my son meant protecting him from pain. Now I understood that sometimes pain is the doorway through which responsibility enters. Marcus still had debts. His business was smaller. His wedding was postponed. His future was uncertain. But for the first time, uncertainty belonged to him. And that was not a punishment. It was freedom, for both of us. Healing did not happen all at once. That was something I learned during the months after Marcus came to my kitchen and admitted the truth. There was no single conversation that erased what had happened. No apology powerful enough to make me forget the transfer papers. No hug that magically restored the trust I had once given him without thinking. And I didn't want that kind of false healing anymore. I wanted something real. Something that could survive uncomfortable questions. Something that didn't depend on pretending the past had never happened. Marcus continued rebuilding his life. His consulting company became smaller but healthier. He stopped trying to impress everyone. Instead of chasing large clients that looked impressive on paper, he focused on a handful of businesses that actually paid on time and valued his work. He told me once that his biggest change was learning to ask a question before accepting a new opportunity. Can I actually afford this? I laughed. Your father would have framed that question. Marcus smiled. I should probably have listened to him 30 years ago. You were 3. I was already difficult. I laughed. The sound felt good. For a while, laughter had felt dangerous. As if enjoying a moment with Marcus meant I was forgetting what he had done. I finally realized forgiveness didn't require forgetting. It required remembering without allowing the memory to control every future moment. Marcus also continued working with Daniel. Every month he reviewed his debts. Every month he made payments. Sometimes they were small, sometimes larger, but they were his payments. He never asked me to cover them. That mattered more to me than the amount. One afternoon I asked him how things were going. He smiled. I made the payment. Which payment? The credit card I used for the wedding expenses. How much, he told me. It wasn't an enormous amount, but I could hear the pride in his voice. I'm glad. I almost skipped it. Why, I had a bad month. What did you do? I cut something else. What? He laughed. My office internet package. I smiled. Your father would be proud. I thought you'd say that. He was learning. Not perfectly, but genuinely. Then there was Claire. Their relationship was slower, much slower. They continued counseling. There were arguments. There were days when Claire questioned whether she could trust Marcus again. There were days when Marcus felt she was punishing him for mistakes he was already trying to correct. And there were days when neither of them knew whether they were rebuilding a marriage or simply learning how to say goodbye respectfully. I stayed out of it. That was another boundary I had to learn. I did not call Claire for updates. I did not ask Marcus what they discussed in counseling. I did not tell him what I thought he should do. If he wanted advice, he could ask. Otherwise, their relationship belonged to them. That was difficult for me. Mothers are often trained by love to step into spaces where they are not needed. I had done it for years. Now I was learning to remain outside the door. One Saturday afternoon, Marcus called. Mom, Claire, and I made a decision. My heart jumped. What kind of decision? We're getting married. I sat down. Are you sure? Yes. Are you both sure? He laughed. That's what I asked her too. I smiled. When not for a while. How long we don't know yet. That surprised me. You're not planning another huge wedding, no? What happened to the historic venue? Cancelled. The band cancelled. The 2-week honeymoon also cancelled. I laughed. What are you doing instead? We're thinking about something small. How small? Just family. Maybe a few close friends. That sounds beautiful. It feels more honest. I understood what he meant. The original wedding had become a performance. This one would be a choice. Months later, I received a simple invitation. There were no embossed letters, no elaborate envelope, just their names, a date, and a small church outside Richmond. The ceremony would be intimate. About 30 people. Claire's parents would be there. So would Marcus's closest friends. I would sit in the front row. And for the first time, I wasn't worried about what the wedding would cost. Because I knew it would not be financed by my savings. That mattered. A week before the ceremony, Marcus came over. He sat at the kitchen table. Mom. Yes, I want to ask you something. All right. Would you be comfortable if I mentioned Dad during the ceremony? My throat tightened. What do you want to say? I want to say that he taught me something I didn't understand until now. I smiled. What? That a good life isn't the same as an impressive life. I looked away so he wouldn't see my tears. That sounds like your father, I know. He was quiet for a moment. Do you think he'd be proud of me? That question broke something open inside me. Yes. Marcus looked down. Even after everything, I took his hand. Especially because you finally faced it. He nodded. I'm still paying everything back. I know. I still have a long way to go. I know. But I'm not hiding anymore. That's what matters. The wedding was beautiful. Not extravagant. Not perfect. Beautiful. Claire wore a simple ivory dress. Marcus wore a dark suit he had owned for years. There were no luxury decorations, no elaborate displays, no expensive spectacle, just people who loved them. When Marcus stood at the altar, I saw the same little boy who once ran through our backyard carrying a broken toy. But I also saw the man he was becoming. He looked nervous, not because he was afraid people would discover a lie, because he understood the weight of the promise he was making. When he looked at Claire, his expression softened. She smiled. And for the first time, I believed they might actually build something lasting. Not because the past had disappeared, because they had decided to build despite it. After the ceremony, Marcus hugged me. Thank you for coming. Where else would I be? He laughed. Then he whispered, I almost asked you to help pay for this. I raised an eyebrow. You did, almost. What stopped you? He smiled. I remembered that I wanted this wedding to belong to me. I hugged him tighter. That's my boy. Later that evening, after most of the guests had left, I sat outside with Claire. The air was cool. The church lights glowed behind us. She held a cup of coffee between both hands. I want to thank you, she said. For what? For not giving him the money. I looked at her. That was not easy. I know. She smiled sadly. If you had, I don't know where we would be. Neither do I. She looked toward the parking lot where Marcus was speaking with her father. I think I finally understand something. What Marcus didn't need someone to save him. I nodded. He needed someone to stop saving him. We sat quietly, then she added, That doesn't mean I'll never be angry again. You're allowed, I know. And Marcus will make mistakes again. I know that too. But now you know what honesty looks like. She smiled. I hope so. Their marriage wasn't magically perfect afterward. They had difficult months. Money remained a subject they discussed carefully. They kept renting rather than buying the expensive house Marcus once promised. They built an emergency fund slowly. They disagreed, they apologized, they learned, and Marcus continued paying his debts. About 6 months after the wedding, he called me one evening. I made another payment. Congratulations. I'm almost done with one of the old balances. That's wonderful. I was thinking about something. What you know the trust amendment? Yes. I've been thinking about whether you should ever change it back. I was surprised. What do you mean? You shouldn't. I laughed softly. You're sure? Yes. Why? Because the person who should manage your money if something happens to you should be the person best qualified to manage it. He paused. And right now that isn't me. I smiled. I'm proud of you. Thanks. Then he said something that stayed with me. I used to think you changed the trust because you stopped believing in me. And now I think you changed it because you finally believed I could become someone who didn't need it. I closed my eyes. There was the lesson. The thing I had struggled to understand for years. Boundaries had not destroyed our relationship. They had given it a chance to become honest. I still had my $420,000. I still had my house. The professional fiduciary remained successor trustee. Marcus remained a beneficiary. Nothing about the legal structure changed simply because our relationship improved. And that was exactly how it should be. Love had returned. Trust was returning too. But control stayed where it belonged, with me. One evening I opened the trust folder and looked at the amendment Rebecca had prepared. I thought about the woman who had signed it. She had been frightened, angry, heartbroken. She had wondered whether saying no to her son made her a bad mother. Now I knew better. The woman who signed that document had not chosen money over her son. She had chosen truth over fear. And that choice had given Marcus something no transfer of $420,000 ever could. The chance to build a life that actually belonged to him. Not his father's, not mine, not Claire's parents. His. As I closed the folder, I thought about Charles. He had always wanted Marcus to have security. But now I understood that security was never supposed to mean a guaranteed escape from consequences. It was supposed to mean having enough love, wisdom, and opportunity to stand back up when life knocked you down. Marcus had finally learned how to do that. And I had finally learned something too. A mother can love her child with every part of her heart, without handing him every key to her life. Sometimes the strongest form of love is not giving more. It is knowing when enough is enough, and having the courage to let the person you love discover what they are capable of without you carrying them. A year after Marcus first placed those transfer papers on my kitchen table, I woke up one Saturday morning and realized I had not thought about the $420,000 in almost a week. That might sound like a strange thing to celebrate, but for me it was enormous. For months that number had represented fear. Fear of losing everything I had worked for. Fear of losing my relationship with my son. Fear that Charles had been right about Marcus. Fear that I had been wrong about myself. Now the money was simply money again. My savings, my retirement security, my husband's and my decades of work. Something I was responsible for protecting, not something I needed to feel guilty for keeping. I made coffee and walked outside onto the back porch. The morning air was cool. Richmond was quiet. A few birds were moving through the trees, and somewhere down the street a lawnmower had already started. I sat in Charles's old chair. I still missed him. That never changed. but grief had changed shape. In the beginning, missing Charles felt like an open wound. Then it became an ache. Now sometimes it felt almost like companionship. I could hear his voice when I needed his wisdom. I could remember his jokes when I needed to laugh. And lately, I had begun to understand that some of the things he had tried to teach me during his lifetime had taken years to reach me. One of those lessons was sitting in my lap. The Brooks Family Trust. The amendment Rebecca had prepared remained exactly as it was. The professional fiduciary remained successor trustee. Marcus remained a beneficiary. The distribution provisions remained structured. Nothing had changed simply because our relationship had improved. That was important. Because forgiveness did not mean pretending the problem had never existed. Trust did not mean removing every boundary. Love did not mean handing back every responsibility someone had once abused. Those things could coexist. I had learned that the hard way. My phone rang. It was Marcus. "Good morning, Mom. Good morning. Are you busy? I'm drinking coffee." "So yes," I laughed. "What do you need?" "Nothing." That answer still surprised me sometimes. He called more often now without needing anything. Sometimes he called to tell me about a client. Sometimes he sent me pictures of something he had repaired around his office. Once he called just to tell me he had finally learned how to make Charles's chili. "It's not the same," I told him. "I know. Your father used too much cumin." I added the cumin. "Then you're learning." He laughed. Our conversations had become ordinary again. That was perhaps the greatest gift of all. No hidden agenda. No financial pressure. No carefully chosen words designed to move me toward a decision. Just a mother and son talking. That morning, however, his voice sounded unusually serious. "I wanted to tell you something. What Claire and I are thinking about buying a house." My heart tightened automatically. He must have heard the silence. "Mom, I'm listening. We're not talking about anything crazy." I smiled. I wasn't going to say anything. "You were thinking it. I'm your mother. I'm allowed to think things." He laughed. "We found a small place. How small? 3 bedrooms. 3, one for us, 1 office, 1 guest room." I smiled. "That sounds sensible." "It is. And how are you paying for it?" "I knew you were going to ask. I worked in payroll for 27 years. You should have expected that." He laughed. "We have the down payment saved." I sat straighter. "You do?" "Yes. No inheritance. No inheritance. No help from me. No." I felt something warm spread through my chest. "How did you manage that we saved?" The simplicity of that answer nearly made me cry. You saved, we saved. I looked toward Charles's photograph through the window. What about the debt almost gone? Almost 1 remaining balance. When will it be gone? 7 months, maybe less. I smiled. That's wonderful. There was a pause. Then Marcus said, "Mom, I want you to come see the house." "I'd love to. It's not fancy. I don't care. I know." And Marcus, "Yes, I'm proud of you." He became quiet. "Thanks, Mom." I could hear emotion in his voice. Then he said, "I'm proud of you too." I smiled. "What did I do?" "You finally said no." I laughed through tears. "That took me 68 years. I think it took me 39. We both laughed. Later that afternoon, I drove to see the house. It was in a quiet neighborhood outside Richmond. It wasn't enormous. There was no dramatic staircase, no marble kitchen, no oversized garage, no expensive landscaping. It was simply a well-kept 3-bedroom house with a small backyard and enough room for the life they were building. Claire met me at the door. She hugged me. "Come in." Marcus was in the kitchen. He looked happy. Not impressive. Happy. That distinction mattered. He showed me the small office where he planned to work. The 2nd bedroom had a desk and a bookshelf. The 3rd bedroom was still empty. "Guest room," he said. "You'll need a bed." "I know. Don't buy one you can't afford." He looked at me. I wouldn't dare. We laughed. Then Claire called us into the kitchen. She had prepared lunch. Nothing elaborate. Soup, bread, salad. We sat together at the small table. At one point, Claire looked at me. "Do you remember the original house plan?" I knew what she meant. The $700,000 house Marcus had once described at dinner. Yes. She smiled. This one costs much less. Marcus nodded. We decided we'd rather own something we can comfortably afford than spend our lives trying to impress people. I looked at him. Who taught you that? He smiled. Your husband. My eyes filled. Claire reached across the table and touched my hand. We sat quietly for a moment. Then Marcus said, "There's something else." I looked at him. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a small envelope. He handed it to me. "What's this? Open it." Inside was a handwritten note. I unfolded it. Mom, I know I once asked you to transfer your savings because I thought your money could fix my life. I was wrong. You didn't give me what I wanted. You gave me the chance to become someone who didn't need it. I looked up. Marcus was watching me. There were more words. I used to think Dad's greatest gift to me would be what he left behind. Now I think it was what he tried to teach me while he was here. Build something you can stand on. I folded the note carefully. I'm keeping this. I figured you would. I looked at him. You know I still have the original transfer papers. He laughed. You kept them. Of course. Why? Because I might write a book someday. He groaned. Please don't. Claire laughed. We all did. And for a moment the entire painful year seemed to fold into one ordinary afternoon. The transfer request. The fear. The trust amendment. The postponed wedding. The debt. The counseling. The rebuilding. All of it had brought us here. Not to a perfect ending. To a real one. A few months later I visited Rebecca. I wanted to review my estate documents again. She smiled when I entered. Are we changing anything? No. She laughed. I had to ask. I just want to make sure everything is still in order. It is. She reviewed the documents with me. The professional fiduciary remained in place. Marcus remained beneficiary. The distribution structure remained. My power of attorney remained with the independent professional arrangement. Everything was exactly as I wanted. Before I left, Rebecca said, "You seem different." I am. How I thought about it. I don't feel guilty anymore. About what protecting myself. She nodded. That's good. I smiled. I used to think boundaries meant I loved people less. And now I think boundaries tell people what love can survive. She smiled. That sounds like something worth remembering. I went home and placed the trust folder back in its drawer. Then I opened Charles's letter one final time. I had read it so often that I knew the words. If he begins treating money, we earned as money, he has already earned change, who controls it before money controls him. I understood now. Charles had never wanted me to punish our son. He wanted me to protect him from becoming a man who measured his future by what his parents had built. And I had finally done that. My son had asked me to transfer my savings before his wedding. Instead, I updated a different document. At the time, I thought I was protecting my money. I was, but I was also protecting something much more valuable. My son's chance to become responsible for his own life. Marcus did not lose his inheritance. He lost his assumption that it was already his. And in losing that assumption, he gained something far better: ownership of his own choices. That evening, I stood on the back porch as the sun disappeared behind the trees. I thought about how close I had come to signing those papers. If I had transferred the money, perhaps the wedding would have happened on schedule. Perhaps Marcus's business would have survived a little longer. Perhaps Claire would never have known the truth. Perhaps everyone would have smiled for photographs. But underneath those photographs would have been the same lie. And sooner or later that lie would have demanded another rescue. Then another. Instead, I had chosen the harder road. The road where my son had to face himself. The road where I had to face my own mistakes. The road where forgiveness came without surrendering my boundaries. I looked up at the evening sky. Charles whispered, "You were right." The wind moved softly through the trees. For the first time, I didn't feel sad saying it. I felt grateful. My son was not the man I thought he was a year earlier. He was better. Not because I had saved him, because I finally stopped trying to. And I was not the same mother either. I had learned that loving someone does not mean carrying their future on your back. Sometimes love means putting the burden down, then standing nearby while the person you love learns how to carry it themselves. My $420,000 remained in my accounts. My home remained mine. The trust remained protected. And my son remained my son. That was enough. More than enough. Because in the end, the document I changed did not destroy our family. It gave us the opportunity to rebuild it honestly. And sometimes the strongest way to say I love you is not by giving someone everything they ask for. Sometimes it is by looking them in the eyes saying no and believing they are strong enough to become better because of it. Ketuk Fan 15. Life Lesson and Final CTA. Looking back, I realized the money was never really the heart of the story. The $420,000 was simply the thing that exposed what had been happening underneath our family for years. My son believed that because he was my only child, because his father and I had worked hard, and because he would probably inherit something someday, that future money could become part of his present life. And I had helped create that belief. Every time Marcus struggled, I rescued him. Every time he made a mistake, I softened the consequences. I told myself I was being a loving mother. But there is a difference between helping someone and preventing them from ever learning how to help themselves. That was the hardest lesson I had to learn. Setting a boundary does not mean you stop loving someone. Saying no does not mean you are abandoning your child. And protecting your financial security does not make you selfish. Sometimes protecting yourself is the only way to protect a relationship from resentment, entitlement, and dependency. I also learned that forgiveness does not require forgetting. I forgave Marcus, but I did not erase the trust amendment. I loved him, but I did not restore financial control simply because our relationship improved. Those things could exist together, and perhaps that is what healthy love really looks like. It has warmth, but it also has boundaries. It offers forgiveness without surrendering wisdom. It gives second chances without pretending there was never a first mistake. Most importantly, it allows another person to take responsibility for their own life. Marcus eventually understood something Charles had tried to teach him years earlier. An inheritance is not a substitute for character. Money can create opportunities. It can provide security. It can make difficult seasons easier. But it cannot build integrity for you. It cannot teach you honesty. It cannot make a marriage healthy. And it cannot turn a person into someone they are not willing to become. If you were in my position, would you have transferred the money to help your child before his wedding? Or would you have done what I did and protected your savings while changing who controlled your future estate? I would genuinely love to know. Tell me your thoughts in the comments, and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. If this story reminded you of something in your own family, share your experience. And if you believe that sometimes saying no can be one of the deepest forms of love, please subscribe for more emotional family stories. Thank you for staying with me through this story. Sometimes the hardest thing a parent can do is stop carrying a grown child. But sometimes when we finally put that burden down, we discover that the person we were trying to save was capable of standing all along. The deepest lesson I learned was that love does not always look like giving. Sometimes love looks like standing firm when every part of your heart wants to rescue someone. For years I believed being a good mother meant protecting my son from pain. Whenever he struggled, I reached for my checkbook. Whenever he made a mistake, I tried to soften the consequences. I thought I was giving him security. But eventually I realized that by constantly saving him, I had unintentionally taught him to depend on a safety net instead of learning how to stand on his own. When my son asked me to transfer my savings before his wedding, I faced a painful choice. I could give him the money and temporarily solve his problems, or I could say no and allow him to face the consequences of his own decisions. Saying no broke my heart, but it also changed both of us. I learned that boundaries are not walls built because we love someone less. Sometimes boundaries are the very things that allow love to survive. You can forgive someone without giving them control over your life. You can support your child without financing every mistake they make. And you can believe in someone's future without giving them the right to spend it before they have earned it. Most importantly, I learned that protecting yourself is not selfish. Your savings, your home, your retirement, and the life you worked decades to build matter. You are allowed to protect them even when the person asking for them is someone you love deeply. And sometimes the greatest gift we can give another person is not money. It is the opportunity to become responsible for their own life. If you were in my position, would you have given your child the money to protect the wedding? Or would you have said no and allowed them to face the consequences? I would truly love to hear your thoughts. Tell me your feelings in the comments and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. If this story touched your heart or reminded you of something you've experienced in your own family, please share your thoughts below. And if you enjoy emotional family stories about love, betrayal, forgiveness,